Okay. Let's give it 2 more minutes. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Linda. It's 6:35. Let's start the meeting. Linda, you are already recording. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to CP3 Land Use Committee meeting for Tuesday, January 22nd, 2022. My name is Jackie Wong. I'm the chair of this committee. We are conducting the meeting through Zoom, and our vice chair, Linda, she's managing the platform tonight. She's going to give a brief introduction about some Zoom features and some guidelines.
Okay, welcome everybody. First of all, the meeting is being recorded, so be aware of that. If you're not a committee member, and I would say of tonight we have a lot of not committee members, please sign in to the chat. So if you put your name and your affiliation in the chat, that would be very helpful. Do not use the chat otherwise unless you have a technical issue, and I will respond to that. Let's see, what else do we want to say? Stay muted unless you're speaking. And please raise your hand if you wish to speak. The way the committee works, the first people who speak will be members of the committee, and then Jackie will let you know when others can speak, and at that point you can raise your hand. I think that's pretty much it, right, Jackie?
Yes, thank you. Okay, next item, you take the attendance, please. Lisa, let me see.
There I go. Yeah, okay. I had to be unmuted.
Okay.
Jackie, are you here? I take it you're here.
Thank you.
Linda Jones, I take it you're here as well. Michael Perlis.
Here.
Jonathan Chu.
Here.
Herman Hewitt.
Here.
Trevor.
Here.
Myself, I'm here. Olympia Kazi.
Here.
Damaris Reyes, we're cooking with gas here. Damaris?
I saw her.
Yeah, I saw her name too.
Damaris. Maybe we come back to her later.
Okay. Steve Herrick.
Here.
And Dominic Berg.
Here. Thank you, Lisa.
Damaris, have you returned by any chance?
Okay, let me let you go.
No. It's...
You haven't returned? I hear your voice.
I think we can take her as here.
Yeah, I think she's here. She's having a little technical difficulty or something, but that was definitely her.
Yep.
Okay, so perfect attendance.
I'm here.
We gathered that. Thank you,
okay,
Damaris.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm having trouble hearing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So thank you, Lisa. Our first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes for our December meeting. Let me know if anyone has problems or just approve it. Okay, I see no questions. The minutes are approved. Our second item on the agenda is 265 South Street cleanup. So to give you guys some backgrounds, 265 South Street is one of those towers planted in the Bridges area. The current owner is Two Bridges, and they are in the middle of selling to a new owner. I think many of you are aware of it from the news. The site was a gas station, so they need to clean up the site before moving forward with any development plan. Community Board 3 received the notice at around last Christmas and 30 days to comment. Our district manager, Susan, got the city to extend the comment period until after our full board meeting, which is January 25th. I normally like to do a wrestle in the next meeting, but this is time sensitive, so we will do a wrestle tonight. And the cleanup is monitored by Mayor's Office of Environmental Remediation instead of State DEC, and OER will explain their role in this project and their findings later. The firm to actually do the cleanup, it's called AKRF. They will be doing the actual cleanup, and they will explain to us what they will be doing. Both agency and the firm have been very accommodating to our requests, and I want to thank them for that. Later, we can ask them about like their interaction with the community board and during the cleanup, the time frame, community updates, staging area, truck routes, working hours, etc. So before I let OER present, Susan, do you have anything to add?
Sure, just for a little context. We have had other brownfields, particularly gas stations, in Community Board 3 area before. They have not come before the board because there really wasn't any reason for them. The one big brownfield we did have before the board years ago was the manufactured gas plant, which was around Reese and St. Emmerich's and Haven Plaza, and that we dealt with the state. This is the first time we've been dealing with the mayor's office on this. And I want to repeat what Jackie said. I've never worked with an agency that has been more accommodating and helpful and informative. So it's been very appreciated and made it all much easier. The only other thing I want to mention is generally on sites of this sort, we look for issues like how the staging area, the truck routes will impact the community, and you know, being able to have the monitoring be transparent and that sort of thing. And that's it. Thank you, Jackie.
I need to unmute myself. Thank you, Susan. Tonight we have three individuals, three staffs from OER. We have Adessa, Michelle, and Sarah. If I remember correctly, Sarah, you're going to do the presentation, right?
Yes, I am.
Thank you, Sarah. Do you need to share the screen or?
Yes.
Okay, hold on, I'll make you a co-host as soon as I find you. Sarah, why don't I see you?
Sarah Pong. She's near the top on my
There you
list.
go. Gotcha. You should be good to go.
Sarah?
Sarah, should I start?
Yes, please. Thank you, Sarah.
Sarah is muted.
There we go.
Sorry.
Okay, hi. Actually, my name is Michelle Sarro. I'm the Assistant General Counsel at the Mayor's Office of Environmental Remediation, My colleague, Sarah Pong, and I will be presenting tonight. Sarah is one of our assistant directors, and also joining, I believe, will be Steve Malinowski from AKRF to answer any detailed questions about the site's remediation and protective measures. We just wanted to start tonight by introducing ourselves and our office to everyone here. So we are the Office of Environmental Remediation. We run a land cleanup program known as the Voluntary Cleanup Program. Under this program, developers work closely with us to perform an environmental study and investigate potential contamination at a site, and then develop a cleanup plan to address the site contamination and make the site protective of public health and the environment. We deal mainly with low to moderately contaminated sites, different than perhaps the state, which it sounds like the community board is more familiar with the state's program. But that being said, we do work closely with the State Department of Environmental Conservation, NYSDEC, as well as the New York City Health Department in running our program. Our program does have a community participation and protection component, as you have seen through the issuance of our fact sheet, which notified the community of the project's participation in our program and invited public comment on the proposed remedy at the site. So this slide provides a general overview of our program. I want to highlight the fact sheets. That's really the public participation piece of our program. That fact sheet 1 is circled here. There will be another fact sheet issued when construction is ready to begin, and then a final fact sheet when construction finishes. But, you know, in this spirit of citizen participation, we are here tonight to answer your questions about the project, about the proposed remedy in our program. But we also just want to note from the beginning that the conversation doesn't end here. After tonight and throughout the remediation, if anyone on this call or citizens of the community have questions and concerns about the project, about the remedy, please contact us by phone, by email. Our contact information is on the fact sheets, as well as this PowerPoint presentation. We've also been in direct contact with the community board. So we are accessible, and we want there to be an open line of communication so that we can answer your questions and respond to concerns in real time. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague Sarah to go over the remedy and community protection measures that will be in place. And then after that, we can open it up to questions. Sarah?
If I could just interrupt for a second, Linda. Stephen from the consulting firm is trying to get on, but I don't see him. He says he's in the waiting room, but I don't see him.
Not in the waiting room.
I'm here. I'm waving to you. You can see me.
Oh, you're in now. Okay,
Yep,
super.
all set. Thank you, Susan.
No problem. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. So can everyone hear me and see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So for this portion of the presentation, I will begin by providing some background information on the project, as well as briefly going over the environmental findings. After that, I'll go over into the remedy as presented in the remedial action work plan. And then finally going over some measures that will be put in place during remediation for community protection. So just to start off, briefly introducing the project, 265 South Street is currently 41,479 square foot parking lot directly south of the Lands End residential buildings. Historically, the site was used as a gas station, an auto repair, and a garage, operating between 1950 to 1976, and as well as other light industrial uses. The new proposed development consists of 2 towers on a 5-story podium, The new building will cover around 25,000 square feet, and the full cellar level below will be used for residential parking, both for the residents of the new building as well as Cherry Street buildings to the north. The first floor will be raised at grade, and the remainder of the site will be consisting of landscaping, driveways, and pedestrian walkways. In 2008, a phase 2 site investigation identified some contamination related to the historic gas station and garage. Because of this, a spill was called in to the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and remediation of the spill occurred in 2009 under DEC oversight. This included removal of some underground storage tanks, patrolling contaminated soils, and treatment of soil and groundwater. Ultimately, the spill was closed in September of 2011. In 2021, the developer approached OER, and a supplemental study was conducted at the site called a remedial investigation. This study included a geophysical survey, which is used to identify underground storage tanks, as well as sampling of soil, groundwater, and soil vapor. The remedial investigation found historic fill down to at least 15 feet below grade. Historic fill is a very common material that's found all across the city, and was historically used to raise elevation across New York. So it typically consists of like soil commingled with a lot of other types of debris, such as brick and concrete. The chemical results of the investigation showed contamination that's consistent with historic fill, as well as the former gas station. During the geotechnical drilling, residual petroleum contamination was found related to the 2008 spill along the southern boundary of the site. So a new spill was called in, and with DEC's oversight, more soil samples were taken around that area to understand the extent of that contamination. So based on the results of the remedial investigation, and also keeping in mind the new development plan, a remedial action work plan was developed and also released for public comment. So this document outlines the remedy that will be implemented at the site, and it has been reviewed by several city and state agencies, all of whom have already reviewed and approved it. The requirements outlined in this plan also mirror the state cleanup, brownfield cleanup program requirements, because our city's program was developed in consultation with the state. So the remedial action plan is a long document because it covers both the remedy as well as all the requirements that have been put in place on our projects to make sure that this remedy is implemented both correctly and is protective of the community. So, and as part of that, an environmental consultant for this project at AKRF will be on site every day. There is active work to make sure the remedial action plan is being followed. So for this next part of the presentation, I'll briefly just go over what the remedy and the construction components are, and also show some examples of typical site activities. And then after that, I'll go over the measures that are put in place to protect the community during remediation. So this first element is not remedial, it's a construction related element, which is the installation of secant walls. So these walls are installed at the site to support excavation into the groundwater. The walls consist of these concrete columns that are put deep into the bedrock. And so during installation, you'll see rigs, large rigs similar to the one in the photo on the left, which are used to drive down casings. And so you'll see it and you'll feel it and you'll hear the clanking from the hammering of that secant piles. A large part of the remediation is excavation. So this plan includes excavation that is needed for both development and also for remedial purposes. So for the development, a majority of the site is going to be excavated down 15 feet for the new building cellar level. That would remove a bulk of the historic fill at the site. And then 2 feet of excavation in the future landscape areas. Excavation for remedial purposes include removing that petroleum contaminated soil in the south portion of the property down 5 to 7 feet into the groundwater. Throughout excavation, you'll see large excavators and trucks that are typical to construction projects. And the overall anticipated time for completion of excavation and foundation for this project before it moves on to the larger superstructure is around 6 to 9 months. Given the size of this site, there may be several activities occurring at once concurrently. So an example photo here shows excavation occurring on one end of a site while pile drilling is occurring on the other end. So these can be happening at the same time. Additionally, excavation may not be completed all at once. So as shown in this photo here, the subgrade foundation walls have gone up, but there's still excavation occurring around it as well. During excavation, different types of material will be encountered. So most of the site does consist of this generic or general historic fill, and it's kind of similar to the lighter brown soils on the photo on the left. But as mentioned earlier, there is a petroleum spill area. And so this material may look a little darker, kind of similar to the darker material on the photo on the left, kind of more north and central. And so as part of spill remediation, this petroleum contaminated material, again, like 5 to 7 feet into the groundwater, will be removed. And then a chemical compound will be applied to the soil to treat the petroleum, similar to what you see the person in the photo on the right doing. Once this is done, soil and groundwater samples are collected, and this data is analyzed by the state DEC for review. If there is a buried tank encountered at the site, there is a plan laid out in the remedial action plan on how this would be appropriately removed. So first, OER would be notified immediately, and if there is a leak, a spill may need to be called into the state. The tank contents are then pumped out, and the tank is cleaned by a licensed professional, and then the tank is carefully removed and then taken to a licensed facility. So as mentioned earlier, groundwater is shallow at the site, between 6 to 8 feet below grade. So excavation is anticipated to reach into the groundwater. As such, there will be a need to dewater, which is basically pumping out the water from the soil to allow for the dry excavation. So you may see a large tank like the one shown on the photo on the most left-hand side, where the water is pumped and stored for future disposal. So from this tank, the water may be either transferred to a trailer to be taken off-site for disposal, similar to the photo in the middle, or if the project has permits in place, they may actually just treat the water and then pump it directly into the sewer. This is shown on the third photo. So once the bottom of excavation has been reached, waterproofing will be installed for the new building foundation because it will be in groundwater. And so waterproofing typically looks like this plastic sheet on the left photo. It's installed completely below the building slab and then outside foundation sidewalls. An engineered composite cover system will be installed at the site once remediation and excavation is complete. And the design of the system is tied to the development. So for this project, it will consist of the concrete building slab, the concrete sidewalk and roadways, as well as 2 feet of clean soil in those landscape areas. Once the bottom of excavation has been reached, the environmental consultant will collect soil samples across the site at the location shown here. And these samples are collected and analyzed in a lab to confirm that the soil remaining at the site is in line with the remedy and is appropriate for the future residential use. So during excavation, soil will be removed and taken off-site. So all of this material will be disposed of at an appropriate facility. To ensure this, OER checks to make sure the facility has all the permits necessary to accept this before anything leaves the site. And also to make sure that the soil goes to the right place and it doesn't end up, where it should not. There is a thorough tracking process in place which includes using licensed trucks and also completing manifests for every single load of soil. These manifests are signed at the generating site, as well as countersigned by the facility, and these manifests are all submitted to OER. Not only will the project be excavating trucking out of material, there are also plans to import material, and this includes clean soil for the landscape areas, as well as other construction backfill. But before any of this material is brought onto the site, OER reviews the source, as well as the chemical data to make sure it's clean. Also included in the remedial action plan is a community protection statement. This is required as part of our voluntary cleanup program. And the purpose of it is to outline all the measures that will provide a high level of protection to the community during remediation. So some of these measures include a construction health and safety plan, which is put in place to protect the workers on site. Another component is the community air monitoring plan, which I'll go over in detail shortly. The plan also includes measures to prevent off-site odors and dust, and also calls for just general good housekeeping in and around the site. So one piece of the community protection is the community air monitoring plan, or CAMP for short. As part of CAMP, machines are used to monitor both particulates or dust, as well as volatiles in the air. There are two components of CAMP. The first is a real-time, where these stationary machines are placed at the perimeter of the site. And these machines run continuously to monitor and also record the levels of dust and volatiles. It's as seen on the image on the right. Just to note though that these machines would not be out during inclement weather like rain or snow. And the second component of CAMP is roving, where the environmental consultant carries this handheld meter and walks around the site to monitor dust and volatiles near the active ground intrusive work. Because this is not recorded automatically, the consultant would be recording these results manually, like on the image on the right. So the CAMP also has a protocol in place for what to do when these readings show an exceedance. If dust readings are above a certain level, dust suppression measures, such as using physical covers or spraying the site down with water, will be used as necessary. And work also may be halted and would only resume until the dust levels go back down to an acceptable level and there is no more visible dust. For volatiles, there's a similar protocol where if the readings are above a certain level, work is halted until the source is identified, and then all the corrective actions necessary are completed. Just to note, even if the machines are not showing readings at levels that trigger a response, some of these actions also just may be taken as a preventative measure. If there are any odors, such as from the petroleum spill area, this may be mitigated by either just limiting the area of open excavation, using physical covers, or using a foam spray similar to what's shown on the photo on the right. And this is used to help suppress odors. Construction work hours should conform to DOB code or to a site-specific permit if a variance has been given. And construction noise and vibrations are all regulated under the New York City Noise Code. On-site soils must be managed properly, and this includes covering any stockpiles with these plastic covers and weighing them down at the end of the day so that there is no potential for off-site migration overnight. Also, as part of community protection is high level of housekeeping to keep both the site and the surrounding streets clean. So this will be done by using a stone truck pad at the site exit, where the trucks will stop and are inspected before they leave the site. If necessary, the workers will either wipe down the tires or spray with water to remove any dirt to prevent the tracking of soil onto the streets. The sidewalks and streets will be inspected frequently so that they're kept free of dirt. And if soil does happen to track off onto the street, it will be immediately swept and cleaned. A truck route has been established and can be found in the RAP. The route has been determined to limit transport through residential areas and also limit the distance to major highways. So in the figure shown here, the blue line shows a route of trucks out of the site and leading to the Manhattan Bridge, eventually to the highway. The red line shows the trucks coming off of the Manhattan Bridge onto local streets and to the site. Additionally, drivers are instructed to proceed without stopping in the vicinity of the site in order to prevent impacts to the neighborhood. The site staging plan is being finalized, but I believe Stephen from AKRF can speak more to that in a little bit. As part of the remedy, the environmental consultant will be on site every day. There is active remedial work to provide oversight and also confirm compliance with the approved remedial action plan. They will be the ones performing the community air monitoring, tracking all the trucks, collecting the disposal manifests, documenting site activities, and preparing all of this in a daily report that is submitted to OER and to the state DEC. After completion of the remedy, a final closure report is prepared, which summarizes all the work that has been performed at the site. It compiles all documentation and is also certified by the environmental professional, confirming the remedy has been implemented in accordance with both the remedial action plan and all applicable regulations. This final document is also publicly available. So as Michelle mentioned previously, the voluntary cleanup program calls for community involvement as part of the program process. And so we are currently in the 30-day public comment period. Originally, this was set to end on January 22nd, but at the community board's request, this comment period has been extended to February 9th. Even though the comment period ends on February 9th, we want to emphasize that communication is important to OER. And so even after the comment period ends, we will continue to receive comments and concerns from the community and throughout for the duration of the project. And so to keep the community updated on the progress of remediation, OER will be sending weekly summary reports of site activities in plain language to the appropriate community contacts. So moving forward, OER is committed to, again, maintaining a relationship with the community and keeping that clear and open line of communication. So if at any point during remediation, you see something that is not in line with what we have shown today, or you just have a general concern, you can always reach out to any of the contacts listed here directly, and one of us will respond to you promptly. We take all concerns and comments from the community very seriously. So yes, as soon as there's a concern, we'll get in touch with the environmental consultant and the developer and contractor to understand the situation and see what needs to be done to address it. Once we have that understanding and a resolution, we then relay that back to the community member. So again, you can reach out to anyone listed here, or you can also always just call the OER's general line and someone can help you there. Kasana Anochi is the project manager from OER for this site specifically. Shaminder Chawla is the deputy director of OER. And so he's also on the line tonight. So if anyone has questions, Michelle, Shaminder, myself, and then Steve from AKRF can do our best to answer them.
Thank you, Sarah. Sarah, I think you mentioned earlier AKRF is going to talk about staging. Is that right? After your presentation, or?
Yes, I believe Steve said he should be able to speak on the staging.
Yeah, this is Steve Malinowski. If you're ready, I could speak about a couple of items that Susan expressed interest in while we spoke this morning, as well as the staging. Thanks everybody for your time. My name is Steve Malinowski. I'm an environmental consultant at AKRF. I've been in charge of working with with OER to develop the plans that Sarah and Michelle just went through, and I thank them for the detail that they went through. My job is going to be to initiate these plans and be really, I guess, the eyes and the ears for OER to make sure that there really aren't any problems with the community. So we're going to have people on site implementing the camp program and looking at the meters, as Sarah had said, but we're going to be trying to take action before there's any problems. So if there are problems, we report them to OER as required the same day in our daily report, as well as a phone call. So we take them as serious as OER. The job isn't going to start full construction until about May. You'll see some preliminary activities probably in February or March, just some preliminary foundation stuff. But the full excavation, I don't expect until late May or June. As far as staging on the site, there's going to be a site security fence and perimeter fence set up around the site. There's also going to be a place along South Street inside the fence on our site where we plan on queuing the trucks. So they're gonna pull in to our site. We're gonna open the fence and bring them inside of our fence and have them queue inside of our lot. Talking to the construction team, most days there would be 20 trucks a day. And when I say 20 trucks, that's or 21 trucks, that's 7 trucks doing 3 trips. But there will be some days, probably a 4-week period, where there's up to 60 trucks a day, and we'd be moving a lot of material. While we do that, we're going to be making sure that it gets loaded properly. There's no dust situations. You will see us spraying water. We don't wait for a dust problem. We always have a fire hydrant permit, and we spray water to make sure things don't have even an opportunity to create dust. I noticed on Sarah's presentation, there was a truck route map, and I know that that's very sensitive to the community. It was brought to my attention a few minutes before the meeting that one of the routes, I think it was the route going to the site, might be on a one-way street. We are looking into that, and I'll recirculate another truck map to OER, and they'll share with the community if there's feedback on a particular route. We have plenty of time to adjust that before May, and we'd be open to anyone's comments, but I think there might be an error. If someone looked at that truck route very closely, there might be a problem. The other thing I guess I wanted to just say is that the gas station was remediated years ago, as Sarah had said. So most of the problems at the site, or the most severe contamination, has been addressed. The state, when they closed that spill, they said that during the rezoning that the reason it was given an E designation and put under the auspices of OER was because there was potential that there could be residual contamination. And that's why we found it, and that's why OER is working with us to clean it up. But it's not as if there was no remediation done. All the tanks have been removed, and there has been soil excavation and groundwater treatment in the past. But if anyone has a specific question, that's what I'm here for. So tell me what you're interested in, and I'll let you know how we're prepared to take care of it.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Sarah. So before I open up for questions, I noticed our council member, Christopher Mattei, is here with us. Council member have been to many of our meetings in the past, but I believe this is the first time he joined us as a council member. Councilmember Mate, do you have anything to say to us?
Thank you, Jackie, for the introduction, and thank you for the presentation from the team at OER. I actually met with them a few days ago and they were able to answer a lot of my questions. So I'll let because I know people don't want to stay here all the evening, I'll let committee members to go first. And if I think of anything else, I'll just add on to it. Thank you,
Councilmember. What we usually do is that we let the committee members to ask questions first. After they finish their questions, then we'll open up for the general public. So Trevor.
Jackie, I'm going to need your assistance in this because I sacrificed my weekend to go over these documents. So I've got a lot of questions that weren't answered or addressed in this presentation. So I'll go as far as you can, and I'll see if there's any committee members. I see Olympia has one up, but I want to make sure that the residents who have attended this meeting, and I see 60, including the chairs from Lions End 2 and other buildings are here, and I want to make sure they get a chance to speak. That being said, you mentioned the community aspect of this and that the community can make a comment, but in my reading, it appears that you've already chosen a remediation, whereas in the document, it says that we have a chance to comment on the remediation because there's 3 options. When will our comments about the remediation plan be taken into account, or are you all set on your remediation plan? I noticed in the first remediation plan, it would remove all the soil and it would no longer carry an E designation, which would mean it would be no longer contaminated. In the plan that you have approved, which it appears that it's been done without community input, you don't remove all of it and it stays as an E designation. Can you clarify that first?
Sure. So I'll take a crack at it first. So OER has not officially approved this remedial action work plan. That comes after the end of the public comment period because we do want to take into consideration any comments or feedback from the community. These documents have been reviewed by other agencies and approved by them, but OER's final approval comes in a decision document that we issue after the public comment period. The way that the remedial action plan is written is that it considers multiple alternatives, so different levels of cleanup that could potentially be implemented. One of them is a level that it's completely removes all the soil at the site to a level that it's called unrestricted. So it's completely clean. You could do whatever you want on that land. That in the eyes of the state, that level of cleanup is basically more for if you want to do farming. But the level of cleanup that is being proposed in the remedial action plan is more suitable for the residential purposes. And so in that sense, there is a caveat where there's different levels of cleanup where the E designation could be removed. It doesn't mean necessarily that the cleanup is not effective or appropriate. The E designation is a little separate from the voluntary cleanup program and then also the cleanup itself.
Quick follow-up on that, but the preferred or the plan that you have recommended, or I'll call it option 2, if I'm a resident and we've done a number of plantings around the area, including across the way at Pier 35 and along the street, would that allow for community type of gardening?
So the restriction would only be placed on this site itself and not
on the site is what I'm talking about.
Can you clarify that? I'm sorry. The planting would be on this property? Yeah,
suppose that in our new world, we're all living in a place where we want community gardening in places. We want to figure out ways we can help the environment. Would the preferred plan that you have chosen allow for residents to have a community garden, not farming, just a regular community garden where they go out and plant and do some basic gardening?
So I believe the level that we have selected in the remedial action plan does allow for community gardening, although we wouldn't do it. So one of the aspects of this plan is to import clean soil onto the site. And so you wouldn't be gardening on the historic fill material. You'd be gardening on at least 2 feet of clean soil that's been brought onto the site.
Okay, because my reading, it said that would not be allowed, but I can go over that later. I'm going to go one more thing and then get to some other committee members. Are you aware of the restrictive declaration on the site, which there are several, but one of them requires for there to be formation of a community construction task force before any work is being done? Are you aware of any of the restrictive declarations?
I'm not familiar with that one.
Well, I'm going to say that I think it's very important that you take a look and talk with DCP and DOB about the requirement. It is clearly stated in the restrictive declarations, and there are several on this property and the two neighboring properties of the proposed development, which basically do not allow you to start work or even talk about work until you involve the community in this community construction task force. It's supposed to be formed by DCP along with community board and elected officials, and we haven't heard anything. All we've heard is that you want to start construction in a month and then start excavation work soon after. So I would urge you to look into that, because I don't see how this even starts if you don't have a community construction task force. The other thing that's required in the restricted declaration is and you have something similar, but this would be for the residents and not AKRF or the developer, is sorry, trying to find stuff when you're printing out 245 pages is not the easiest thing. But there is a independent monitor that's supposed to be in place before construction starts, and that's not something done by OER or any related agency that you work with. It's supposed to be independent, and we haven't heard anything about this independent consultant. The reason I'm saying this is because we initially thought this was going to be, or at least I initially thought until I got to page 174, this is to be more of scraping off the topsoil and that type of remediation, where you're talking about pile driving and actually starting foundation work, and the foundation work being part of the solution of the remediation. I just don't see how you start that. And lastly, and this is because I see Stephen is on the phone from AKR. We've had a number of dealings with you. There are a lot of errors in your analysis of the site. You missed a lot of daycare centers. You didn't talk about the park that was across the street or other sensitive receptors. It looks like everything was done from a Google Maps version as opposed to someone walking the site. But we can help you in determining some of these other sensitive sites that you missed, including some after-school programs in the building right next door, which I live in. With regards to street traffic, I can tell you right now from our experience at Excel that those trucks don't follow anything. I live on a one-way street right next to the site where I could slip and trucks would go up and down that street, or it's a one-way up that street all the time, even though they were supposed to take Pike. It's just easiest to get to. It's a quick turn. So there will definitely need to be some sort of traffic mitigation going on there. With the dewatering program, that's not a fun process. The building next to me, the 80-story Excel Tower, did the same thing. And we had 7 water main breaks, 7, and a collapsing of the street and the sidewalks. And that this is a similar site with similar issues. So careful attention needs to be paid for that. But I would say that we could probably discuss this in our community construction task force, which it's on your, I'm not saying AKR or OER, but it's on DCP to form before we even talk about construction.
Thank you, Trevor. Before you ask a lot of questions, I think before we go to the next committee member, I think it's fair to have Sarah or OER to respond first before we go to the next question.
Yeah, so just quickly, I want to respond before maybe Steve, you want to take over for those construction logistic comments. So for this restrictive declaration, I want to be upfront. I don't know exactly what you're referring to. And if you have a copy of that document, I'll be happy to look it over. But if it's something that is not in our jurisdiction, it's not something that we really have control over in terms of construction starting. Our notice is required for this project in order for them to get a permit from DOB. But the start of the project and city planning's involvement is something that we're not really linked into. But if you can share that document, we'd be happy to look into and see if there's anything that we can tie into what we would require. And also moving on into the sensitive receptors, those are generated by using city databases. And so anything that's been registered within a city database is where you get those receptors. And if there is a flaw in like how we are doing that, we'll be happy to take that feedback. Yeah, so I don't want to put it all on Steve that he did it incorrectly for that. It is from just a database. And so if you have feedback on how we can do that better, we'd be glad to take that. And for the dewatering and traffic, you know, we can say that they'll be doing the right things, but I think that's something that we mentioned earlier is if you do see something going on that is not lining up with what we said or is not following the plan that's been committed to, you can always reach out to us directly so that we can get the contractor and the developer on the line so that those situations can be resolved. We are a connection between the community and development team. And so I'm sure you can get us on the phone much quicker than you can get a developer. And so we do want to be that resource for the community if you see something that we want to get that addressed immediately. And so Steve, if you want to speak on to more about the traffic and the dewatering.
Well, before Steve goes, thank you, Sarah, for that. Did you manage to get the developer to this meeting? Because who's ultimately responsible for this for the construction of this project?
So currently, the project is being traded hands. We started this project off with 2 bridges, but it is being sold to another developer who will be developing the project and also implementing the RAP.
Are any of them here tonight?
Unfortunately, they are not here.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Stephen, you can.
Trevor, I'm sorry, Steve. Stephen, I'm sorry. Trevor, were you able to maybe are you able to share the restrictive declaration with us, or because Sarah was not aware?
Yeah, they should have been aware. I mean, there are a series of restricted declarations on this property that I would imagine, but that city agencies don't talk to each other, that they should. But I can share it. I did share it with the community board early on. It was, I mean, it's quite restricted declarations are much better than community benefits agreement, but because they can't start work or they can't get permits or certificate of occupancy. But I'm just surprised that this agency wasn't aware of these restrictive decks. That being said, I can send it to Sarah, and I'm sure she can contact DCP or DOD to figure out where to go. But this project can't start without a community construction task force.
Thank you. Stephen?
Thank you, and thank you, Sarah. So I am familiar with the restrictive declaration. I'm just checking somewhere quick on OER's website because at one point we might have shared it when the project started, but I don't see it on Epic. And Sarah, I certainly can get it to you as well. Trevor, I apologize. I don't know the status of the construction task force. That was not under my purview. I am aware of some of the other requirements that we had to help ownership get ready for that were required by the restrictive declaration. Like there's a construction monitoring plan that I know that they're preparing, and there's also an archaeological monitoring plan. There was some sensitive resources in the area. And while there's a certain excavation in certain areas, my firm was going to be doing that monitoring. I know that the construction monitoring plan is being authored now, but I have to check on the construction task force. That was not something that I was involved with.
Okay, and there's also a community, and I can't find the page. It's a community construction liaison that's for the community itself. That's part of the restrictive deck. I'll see if I can find it, but Jackie, you can move on because I have other questions.
Okay. One more quick point. You mentioned dewatering, and Sarah spoke in detail about the secant pile wall. One of the main advantages of installing a 3.5 thick concrete wall in that fashion is to limit the movement of groundwater. So we're doing that so we have to dewater less. That's one of the benefits of it.
Thank you. I'm going to Olympia. Do you mind if I let Susan speak first? I don't know if because she has been communicating with agencies and the firm. Maybe there's something she can share with us. Susan.
I just wanted to remark as far as regarding having the developer at the meeting. I had shared that the developer would not be at this meeting because the current developer is only going to be the developer for a few more weeks until the paperwork goes through, and that I will try to get the future developer to come to a later meeting. And OEM has also said they would, help encourage this. So the fact that they're not here today is because there isn't a real developer to come, but we will try. I just want to also mention, as far as communications, anyone in the public clearly can communicate any issues with OER or the remediation. But if we want the community board to follow up and it to be in any way dealt with at future meetings, it should come through the community board office.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you, Olympia. Olympia, you up.
Thank you. My concern, beyond reading a few dozens of those hundreds of pages, I also try to understand better the process with e-designation and what this voluntary program means. And I think it's a little bit misleading because it's not voluntary in the sense that the developer, in order to move swiftly with construction, they opted in this program. Did I understand this correctly? They had to because there was a need designation, right?
Olympia, can you finish all the questions and then let's let OER to respond? Or this is the only question you have?
No. So basically, the whole problem is, understanding the process, because it sounds right now that the AKRF private consultant paid by the developer is the person basically doing all the measuring. And, for the contamination, they develop the plan, they measure, they report. I mean, I'm sure they're going to do their best. However, there should be within this process a better,
independent
counterbalance. I don't know how to describe it, but fundamentally, unless the city, more proactively has extra controls, this is very much the same people doing the plan, checking and reporting. And I'm sure they're going to do their best, but I would like to have independent oversight for sure. This was one question. The second question that I had, that is not just for this case, again, procedural about all cases like that. I'm not an expert, but it says that currently there is absent federal and state directive about what these volatile organic compounds and the vapor result samples, etc., about what would be the optimal benchmark in order for certain things to happen. So my question is, in the report, it says that that's why they have to decide to follow the New York State Department of Health guidance. But I wanted to understand from someone who's a technical expert, is this optimal, or is this, we don't know what is good for people's health, so we're going with the only number we have from this agency that is not federal and is not state, and so we don't know what level of precision it has. And then the last question that I had, I have like Trevor many, but I think the most important ones is, I was very confused about these spills because the previous spill seemed to have taken like 2 years from the moment they discovered it. I think, did you say 2009? And then it was closed in 2011 and it still wasn't completely remediated. So this time we're waiting for 6 to 9 months, but fundamentally from the technical points that I was able to understand, you're going to focus on very specific areas in the north and in the south, etc. But as we know, these contaminants is such a large site, they're going to impact a lot of other areas. And my concern is if you're rushing it and you're remediating while you're constructing, and then you cover everything, but then we have the problem of stormwater management. So if you haven't cleaned up this thing and you just build something on top, but then it is contaminated below, this can still create problems in the long term in terms of, what happens underneath when stormwater management, stormwater comes out, etc.
Okay.
So these were the first questions that I had.
That's not the first question. You have three questions. Sarah and Steve, I guess you can respond on the independent monitoring and also benchmarks, standards, and etc.
Sarah, you want to go first, or you want me to start?
Sure, I'll take a crack at the questions. So I think the first one that stood out to me was your comment about the optimal benchmarks for some of these contaminants, and you mentioned
I'm sorry, the first question was if you have an independent monitor or construction monitoring other than AKRF.
Oh, yes. Oh, I'll get to that. I just wanted to address this one first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry. It's okay. If that's okay with you. So yes, so federal regulations do not have guidances for all types of contamination. As you know, the federal usually defers to the states, and then states sometimes defer to local governments because the federal is a big umbrella. And so for them to set a number, it may not be applicable to all states and not to all environments. And so they usually give an umbrella, and then it's up to the states individually to come up with these benchmark numbers and levels that are acceptable for certain uses. And so that's why it then falls on to New York State, who has come up with these numbers. I think you mentioned specifically soil vapor, was that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I gave it as an example.
Yeah, so for this, most of these numbers for the contamination has been determined by New York State DEC in consultation with the state based on years of research and data to determine what numbers are acceptable for public health, and also based on just the type of exposure people will have. And so for soil and groundwater, those numbers can be found in state regulations. The soil vapor numbers are found in state DOH guidances. And these numbers are actually updated over time based on the new data. And so New York State DEC is actually updating some of their numbers this year to be more in line with how they understand these contaminants to interact with people and overall human health. And so that's why those are the numbers that we stick to when we do these cleanups. In terms of, you said the spill that was done in the past took 2 years. Actually, the work was done over a course of 2 months. I kind of just jumped over that. I apologize. I was done in 2 months in 2009, and that was the actual active remedial work, which included the removal of contaminated soils and also treating of the groundwater. And so what New York State DEC does for spills is that they like to monitor because they are concerned with groundwater contamination. And so what they did was, after the remediation was complete, they did 2 years of groundwater monitoring to make sure that the levels didn't go back up. They wanted to make sure that the levels were equilibrated and we're not going up and we're not going to be a concern. And that's why they closed it in 2011 and not 2009. And so for our purposes, for this spill, it will be delineated. So that's why AKRF took all those additional samples to understand just how big the area of this contamination is. And they also took samples vertically to understand how deep it goes. And so that's why the plan is right now is to excavate 7 feet down to remove all that contamination. However, we're not going to just close our eyes and just assume everything has been done, because that's, as I mentioned, we will be collecting samples. They'll be collecting soil and groundwater sample from this area. And then we're going to compare it to those standards, the state standards that I mentioned earlier, to make sure that we've cleaned it up. If it's at levels that are not acceptable, that are above standards, we will have to figure out another way. So that could be, excavating more of this material out or doing more treatment of the soil and groundwater. So it's not like they take it out and then we're just going to backfill it and think that it's fine. We have data to support that what they did is sufficient before it gets covered up. And then for the independent oversight, so OER is unable to, provide a third-party independent oversight, because we believe that our office is that oversight. We manage hundreds of projects, of cleanup projects across the city. And, we don't have the manpower to be on site all the time, which is why we require, an environmental consultant to be on site every day, to do all this monitoring, to report to us on a daily basis, and also report to us in real time if there are any issues. I can speak for AKRF. We've worked on dozens and dozens of projects with them. And, even though they are hired by the developer, they have a professional responsibility and also a legal obligation to follow these regulations and report to us. And I can tell you that, they have been doing that, even if they see something that's not going correctly or according to the plan, it's something that they would report. And I know that might not be the most reassuring answer, but we've done hundreds of projects in this manner. And because we have that relationship with the consultants as well. And so, Steve, if you want to also jump in and speak on that.
I appreciate that. We take it very seriously. My boss is going to stamp it with her license as a professional engineer. The team that is currently leading the construction, not the developer. I believe the construction manager is going to be transferred with ownership. I did a state project with them that was also an OER project over in Dumbo. And I understand what Trevor said about the truck drivers sometimes doing whatever the hell they want. But this construction team, we don't tolerate that. We had a large site with lots of trucks, and sometimes they didn't go the right way, but if we knew about it, there were guys that we banned from the job for idling in the street. There was one individual that we kept telling him in the winter to turn his truck off, and he wouldn't do it. And we actually put his license or someone who's being not complying with our plan, we're gonna call them out on it.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Sarah.
Jackie, one question that was important that I don't think they answered, and I want to make sure that I said it correctly, is, so what do you do in the long term, was the question about stormwater management. So see, if this happens, 6-9 months, and they start building foundations, etc. I mean, and you said you're gonna get samples, but this is the earth, like it changes, right? So what do you do later? Especially, I believe that you may have issues with stormwater management after you start building or you completed building. So how do you check the status of contamination at the soil?
Well, as Sarah said, when we get to the bottom of the excavation, we'll document the conditions when we finish. And then the dewatering would stay in effect and it would stay dry, so there would be no changes during the construction. But after construction, natural conditions would come back into play, and I would imagine the groundwater flow would be towards the East River. But with that said, there would be less and less contamination there to move around because we're cleaning it up. And when I was working on the cleanup plan, I had to simultaneously work with OER and DEC. And at one point I was speaking with the case manager at DEC about how far I needed to go at the southern end. And quite frankly, he insisted that I made extra effort to get it. And we had the results, and he made me update my plan to include an extra remedial excavation outside of the foundation where we're not supposed to dig for the foundation, to focus in on this area. And as the water is lowered in that area and we do the work, that we're going to document that the soil on our site is clean. They're not responsible to go off-site.
Thank you. Lisa, you're up.
Yeah, I guess I have two questions. They're pretty straightforward. One is, I didn't read all 3,000 pages of the two documents, but I read the summaries. And there was mention a couple of times of the fill including pottery. And then I think Stephen mentioned that there was going to be a separate study as to archaeological issues. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. And will that be completed before any work begins? And then the second question I have is the very first bullet in the plan, the remedial action work plan says there's going to be preparation of a citizen participation plan, and I'd like to understand exactly what that is.
I also wonder if the citizens participation plan is similar to what Trevor brought up earlier about the community construction task force.
I don't think
no,
so.
okay.
Yeah, but so
Sarah,
yeah, those are my two questions.
thank you, Lisa.
If I can start, I'll address the archaeology question first. So that's not under OER's purview because they're environmental, but we're working with the Landmarks Preservation Commission. And one of my colleagues prepared an archaeological monitoring plan. It was required by the restricted declaration. It was approved by Landmarks, and they're awaiting construction to do the monitoring. I don't know the exact extent of it, but I do know that in certain areas, if not the whole site, we will have an archaeologist on site making sure there are no artifacts. But I believe it's a section of the site, not the entire site.
So you don't know specifically what pottery or what that was referring to. Is this like settlers? We assume it's settlers, not Indians, or we don't know anything?
I apologize. I don't know the answer.
Okay.
I work with an archaeologist, and I could probably get you a copy of the archaeology monitoring plan that was approved. I would assume that that would have more detail in it if that's something that you'd be
I'd be interested in seeing that. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the citizen participation plan, please.
Yeah, so that's, oh, sorry.
No.
Okay. So the first bullet of the Remedial Action Work Plan is this citizen participation plan, which is actually included in the wrap. I think it's one of the first appendices. I understand it's probably buried deep in this report. Basically, it's just a quick 2-pagers that just outlines how OER expects the project to engage the community. So I have it open for an example one where it includes issuing these fact sheets, directing people to a repository where they can find all the documents, which is our website, creating a contact list with all the pertinent neighbors and elected officials, and then how OER is to, or how the project should address community concerns. So it's just a high-level outline of how OER expects projects to engage in the engage with the community. So it might be Appendix 1 in this document, but yeah, it's just a general high-level guidance.
Thank you, Sarah. So Trevor is up, and after Trevor, we have to open up to the public members.
Yeah, I just have some clarification because I know people are waiting. The first one is we got a quick overview of the timetable. I know you said February, March. Some work is going to start, and then foundation work in May. If you could just clarify that. The restrictive declaration, it also requires the appointment and role of a monitor independent with DCP's approval. I don't think we have that on, well, I know we don't have that on board because no one said anything. You mentioned earlier that all of the tanks have been removed, but I noticed in the remedial action that it says that there was one tank left, a 30,000 gallon tank, which would require removal, which is on the site from, or intruding onto the site from 275 Cherry Street. Can you confirm that one need to be removed because you said that they had all been removed.
Yeah, so can I just jump in and address your question? All the tanks from the old gas station have been removed. As part of our investigation, OER made us scan the site to make sure there's no new tanks. And we also look for utilities too. But when we did that, to our surprise, we alerted the client and said, hey, there's a tank from the neighbor's property that's sticking its nose into where your foundation's going to be. And we confirmed it with test pits. I believe it's like 6 or 8 feet onto our site. The owner has been in discussion with the related companies who owns, I believe, 265 and 275 Cherry Street, and they're working out a plan. It's my understanding that there's 2 big 30,000 tanks that service those buildings. One of them is fiberglass and much newer, while the one that's sticking into our property is a really old metal one. I believe that they want to abandon in place or remove the old one, the metal one. They haven't decided. They're going to work with DEC to do that. And that's going to be something that Related is going to work on. And then they're going to pipe the other tank to feed both buildings. So they're going to just use the 30,000 gallon fiberglass tank. But this tank that's sticking its nose in, it may get removed or they may abandon it in place. If they abandon it in place, we would just kind of, I guess, for lack of better words, cut the nose off the tank that's sticking in our site. But I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and if you wanted to answer the question on the timetable so I can be more specific.
Yeah, so there's a tax incentive called 421A, and it has to be satisfied by June for developers to receive certain benefits. And for this project, it requires the installation of one major foundation element or a pile cap and a pile. And ownership is gearing up to do one pile cap in February or March. I don't have the date, but it would probably be late February or early March. And they're gonna bring a drill rig in and install a caisson with the rig like Sarah had showed you, and then probably do a small excavation to put some concrete on top of it. After that, the project will probably lay dormant for a little bit while they gear up on the construction plans, and they don't expect to start again until May or June.
Hey, Stephen, if you could provide us with that. I mean, I know what you just said, but I don't see anything, and I think that's important to know that you expect construction to start within a few weeks. We weren't aware of that.
We don't expect construction to start in a few weeks. We have not scheduled it.
I'm talking about the February. You mentioned February. We're now January 18th.
It's going to be very late February or March. We have to have a meeting with OER at least 2 weeks in advance. And I don't know if they're going to do a project fact sheet before this 421A pile or if they're going to wait until construction. But we could certainly let you know at least 2 weeks ahead of time. And I could let you know the duration of that as well.
All right, Stephen, thank you. And before Jackie, I just want to follow with this. It's just that I hope OER doesn't have the same concern about meeting that 421A deadline as our community's health is at risk here. I think, and I understand what you're saying, Stephen, and I appreciate that explanation. We were all aware of that June expiration. We don't know what the government's going to do, but I do think that regardless of whatever you find or what happens, that we're not buying by getting a foundation pile in order to meet that tax break. They're already getting tens of thousands of dollars as an incentive to participate in this program, which I mean, we didn't go over it, but that's not as important. But I'm assuming that OER does not care about that particular deadline.
This is Michelle from OER. Just to respond to Trevor's comment, OER does not have deadlines. We work hard to keep projects on track, but our ultimate goal is protection of the environment and public health. And so we wouldn't have, we put out this draft remedial action work plan for public comment because we are confident in the proposed remedy. And we won't approve a remedial action work plan until, you know, we're satisfied that it meets environmental requirements. And we do work hard to keep projects on their timeline, but if the environmental requirements are not met, then the project's not going to get sign off from OER.
Thank you. Jackie, I'm going to cede so you can go to the members and then if there's any time, I'll ask them all.
Yep. So Olympia, can you ask a quick question, because I really want to open up to the.
Basically, I just wanted to make sure that we all understood what you meant. So to Stephen's point, when he was talking about the pile cap, it was not basically, it's just putting in a foundation so that they can qualify for the tax break, right? That's what you meant?
They're putting in one element of a foundation to qualify for the tax break.
So that reminded me of another question that I made before that it wasn't answered, and I wanted to ask if anybody from the OER can answer it now. That is, it's called volunteer, but it's not really volunteer. Basically, because of the E designation, they had to do this. And so my question about the process is, like, I understand ultimately your agency needs to make sure that the remediation is good, but is there like what is the developer doing here? Are they getting anything, or they're just responding to the designation? They have to do this, but there is nothing else in terms of timing, tax breaks, etc., that is taking place here? Because it wasn't clear in the material that I read. It was confusing.
So as a result of the zoning action that the site was involved in, an E designation was placed on the property. And I won't go into too much detail on that unless others want a further explanation of the E designation. But that's really a product of a zoning action where because of environmental review requirements that accompany the rezoning, this requirement is attached to the property to identify potential soil issues at the site and warranting investigation at the point when a future developer wants to develop the property. The E designation, when the developer needs to pull a building permit, that E designation triggers a requirement where the developer must come and meet with OER. So we, OER, the government agency office, can work with the developer to investigate the site, understand the environmental conditions at the site, and then require the appropriate remedy for based on the investigation as well as the proposed end use at the site. And so that's where the E designation comes in and requires OER's sign off. So like I mentioned before, OER, we will make sure that the proposed remedy will satisfy environmental requirements before we sign off on it. The voluntary program is voluntary. It does provide certain incentives to developers who opt into participating. It does also come with additional requirements, but this developer has opted to enter into that voluntary program, which led to that fact sheet that was released and noticed to the community members as well as the community board and local officials. And so the developers really participating in both programs, but both result in OER's oversight of the project in terms of the remedy.
And what are the incentives?
So we offer some grant money to offset the cleanup costs. So $25,000, $35,000 in grants that can only be used to reimburse remedial expenses to clean up the site. We also work closely with sites such as this one that have spills. We coordinate with the developer and state DEC. We have a soil exchange program that enables sites that have excess clean soil can transfer those to sites in need of soil. There's also depending on contaminations that's encountered. I don't think it would apply to this site, but there's an exemption from the hazardous waste fees and special assessments that are assessed on properties that dispose of hazardous waste. So there are a few benefits as well as a liability protection, but that's really a summary of them, and that's what we like to incentivize developers to come into the voluntary program, although there are some additional procedural requirements. But at the end of the day, it's the same cleanup that's being achieved.
Thank you, Michelle. We have to go to, thank you, Olympia. We have to go to the public. Tawana?
You want the 2-minute timer?
I think it should be okay, but Tawana,
Just do it informally.
Yeah, we usually give 2 minutes to the public members to speak, so just be mindful about the time. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. I'm Tawana Grant. I am chair of the Lands Into Resident Association Incorporation, and that encompasses the 2 buildings of 265 and 275 Cherry Street. And I speak for the residents, which I'm sure a few are on here that would like to speak for themselves. But in terms of this process, there are many, and I mean many, because I'm hearing that this hasn't been approved yet. And I don't know if putting up this pile cap in, if approval needs to be done by OER first before that happens or not. But I just want to say that the residents, we have a lot of seniors in these 2 buildings, and we are very concerned about health. That's our first priority. I understand that the builders want to build, they want to make their money, understood. But the first priority is health with our residents here. And there are many who have health conditions because we have been impacted by 9/11. We have been impacted by Sandy, which I'm sure has had some type of effect on the grounds and the soil. And we're still impacted by COVID. Many deaths here. Seniors are going through emotional issues. I'm sure everyone understands the impact of COVID, so I don't have to go through that. But my point is that we are speaking, and this is like, I'm not a construction person. I'm not familiar with all these processes, which I'm sure a lot of the residents here are not. This is the first time we're hearing, this quick movement now of progression for this project. We're hearing that there's a coastal resilience project that's going to take place. That's another impact, because that's another construction, a lot of noise. We're talking dust. I understand you have things in place. Sounds great on paper, but we never know how these things are going to turn out. And then we have, the MTA that's doing their own thing. There's so much going on here. And I feel like at this point, it's a rush, because there's a deadline to meet to make sure that they make their money. This is a free country. Everyone can make their money. But right now, this is about health. Thank you.
Thank you, Tawana.
Oh, I just want to say one more thing, please. If you can definitely, because our 2 buildings are impacted directly, if you can please keep the Lands Into Resident Association abreast to what's going on, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tawana. Margaret, you are up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Margaret Moy, and I'm also a member of the Lands Into Resident Association. I live in one of the lower floors of the Lands Into buildings, and when it rains hard, the sewers get backed up, which causes the sinks to clog up in my apartment and other apartments. I just wanted to know what will be done to prevent these toxic materials from entering our homes through the sewer system. Thank you.
Anyone want to comment? Megan, you are up.
Hi,
Megan. Hi.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, sorry about that. Hi, I'm Megan Malvern. I am a co-founder of Children First, and we were a grassroots group put together in reaction to the 250 Water Street toxic remediation. And it is like Groundhog Day listening to this. And there are so many things that I find scary and not acceptable for the community. What are they going to do about the windows and the people facing so close to where this site is going to be in the construction? Can there be anything done to mitigate that? Specifically, let me also point out that the camp situation that they have proposed for you, the community air monitoring program, it's 2 stations. You should have at least 4, if not 6. And it also, I believe, if Sarah, you mentioned that the camps would be turned off in snow and in rain. Will the construction site be turned off in snow and in rain? Also, we found out from 250 Water Street, what they were doing is at the end of the day, at the end of the work day, they were turning off the air monitors, despite the fact that elevated elemental mercury vapors and VOCs continued to climb and climb and climb. At the end of the day, when they turned off monitors, they were at their highest level and trending up. We don't have the data. And this was all being put forward and all being okayed by Langen and then by the NYS DEC. I completely agree that you should be very suspect about who's double checking the data. We also found out that camps were mislabeled, data was misrepresented, and a number of really, really disturbing problems. And that is the reason why I hope that you as a community get an independent monitor. I would love to share the work that we've done and the woman that we've worked with who is incredibly gifted at advocating for people. So, but specifically, Sarah, could you answer about the camps and confirm that they're going to turn them off? And if they are going to turn them off, are they going to be turning off the work?
Thank you, Megan.
Oh, sir, am I allowed to respond?
Yes,
okay,
you can.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so at a minimum, yes, as I went over, there's 2 stationary camp machines placed, one upwind, one downwind. That's used to just understand like what the levels are before anything is on site and then anything that's leaving the site. That's why we generally ask for at least 2, one upwind, one downwind, as well as the handheld one that the consultant is using while they're walking around the site closest to the active work. So that would be the highest and the worst case scenario in terms of for dust and volatiles. I mentioned that the stationary machines might be turned off during rain and snow because these machines are sensitive, and so they wouldn't stand up well to those types of inclement weathers. Also, a lot of the dust suppression and measures include spraying the site, and so when the site it's raining and it's wet, there's less likelihood for dust, which is why a lot of times the machines may not be necessary in that instance. But again, that does not mean that the handheld monitors are not being used. Those are not sitting out in the snow and in the rain, they're being handheld. So those would be operational, but the stationary machines themselves are more sensitive because they can knock over and things like that.
Thank you. Grace, and then followed by Tanya.
Oh, thanks, Jackie. Actually, can we let Tanya go first since she's a resident? I'll go after her.
That's fine. Tanya, you're up. Tanya. Grace, why don't you go first? I think she's having some technical problem.
No problem. Okay. Yeah, I'm also a part of the parent group that Megan talked about, Children First, where we've been dealing with the brownfield cleanup in the seaport. And I just have again, I was astonished by how thick that data pile was, of all the forms that you submitted for the public to review. I mean, I think that that's an impossible task for any person to go through, and without any technical knowledge. I really believe that this community deserves an independent community monitor that should be funded by the developer. And I think that that's a very reasonable ask of the community to make sure that they have someone advocating on their behalf for what the safety measures in place. I have a few questions around I read a few things and wanted to know, can you talk to me about what vapor intrusion tests have been conducted? And have you confirmed that there's no vapor intrusion from the site to the 2 residential buildings nearby?
Grace, that's all the questions you have, right?
Oh, I have more, but I was just
Yeah,
waiting to go one by
Why
one.
don't,
If that's it.
no. I think you'll
Okay,
better
okay,
if you
keep-
just, yeah,
Okay,
keep going
okay,
so
great.
that we can, just, this is for time consideration.
Okay, sure, no problem, no problem. Okay. Is there any evidence of free phase petroleum in the groundwater? And how are you managing contamination in the groundwater? And is there any concern that the groundwater will allow VOCs to travel towards the residential buildings? The other is, from what I understand, gasoline can be more hazardous at lower concentrations where it can be explosive. Can you tell us whether we should be concerned about this and what levels you are seeing?
Thank you,
And
Grace.
and sorry, one more. You mentioned, Sarah, during your presentation that in the event that another tank was hit, that you would take measures to deal with that. Are you saying that you do not know if there's another tank in the site or not? It would seem like there's some conflicting information about what you said in AKRF, and just want to make sure that you've done a proper geophysical survey of the site. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. So I think I could tag team this with Steve. He can go more into like the contamination details. So I guess working backwards, hopefully I can answer these all. The first one was that I mentioned about the plan in place in the event of a tank discovery. So AKRF did perform a full geophysical survey of the site. They did not find any additional anomalies indicative of a gasoline storage tank related to the previous historic gas station. The 2 anomalies they did find is what Steve mentioned earlier, were those 30,000 gallon oil tanks that currently serve the 2 Cherry Street residential buildings. And so those are the only anticipated tanks, one of which is not even on this property, it's on the Cherry Street property. But yeah, from the results of that geophysical survey, we don't anticipate that there's another tank, but with construction in New York City, you never know until you start digging. So that's why there is a contingency plan in place. But as of now, it's not anticipated. For vapor intrusion, we did do, AKRF did perform soil vapor sampling to see the level of contamination at the site. This data was also reviewed with state, who is the agency that is most concerned with offsite contamination or potential intrusion to offsite residential buildings. And so based on the current data that we have, we don't think that there is vapor intrusion into the other buildings, specifically from this property itself. The contamination we did samples all across the site, and most of the contamination is localized to that historic gas station area, but it does not show that this is migrating offsite in terms of soil vapor. And then Steve, you can go into if you saw El Napo material in the groundwater, but in terms of the explosive concentrations, these levels are not at concentrations that are explosive. If they were, this would be something that immediately the state would take over because this is something that our office would not be handling if these are contaminants that are potential for explosive. Oh, Steve, if you want to discuss if there was free product in the wells you installed, and you're muted. Steve, if you want to go over what you found in your groundwater wells, and you might want to unmute. Am I muted? I'm sorry. I don't know.
Really? Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. It says here, allow participants to unmute themselves. Okay, try again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I was hoping somebody was going to say it.
I'm sorry, Stephen. I'm sorry. Before you go on, I just wanted to say that after, for time consideration, Grace, and then after Grace will be Tanya and Maggie, and then I'll close the public session. We have to move because we still have a wrestle to do. So Maggie will be the last one for the public session.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to make sure I hit this question right. I know there was multiple areas. First, this is not a heavily contaminated site like those brownfield sites that we spoke about. This is a site that has residual contamination and fill. It's very common across New York, and that's why we're with OER and not the DEC. So right off the bat, we don't expect any major mercury vapors or other vapors. We do expect some petroleum, and we have a plan for that. As far as the groundwater data, there was no floating product encountered. We saw just some odors in the soil when you got near the groundwater level. I would not expect that to affect the buildings at Cherry Street. The natural flow of groundwater is towards the East River. That's not going to change. And we are cleaning up the residual contamination that we found on our site and adjacent to our site. So it should only improve any groundwater matters that are there. There was also a provision in the plan that when we get to the bottom of the excavation in the contaminated zone, we're going to apply a product called ORC that Sarah talked about. It's an oxygen release compound that will help even further break down the petroleum after we put the building up. So it will continue on for some time to help provide oxygen to break down the residual petroleum that's left in the area. I think Sarah answered the other questions, but if there's something I missed, let me know and I'd be happy to hit it.
Thank you, Stephen. Tanya and then Maggie. Tanya, you have 2 minutes. Looks like Tanya still has technical problem. Maggie, why don't you go first?
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Maggie Dalal. I have also worked closely with some of the other parents at 250 Water Street and learned a lot about environmental remediation. And I had 2 questions. I just wanted to follow up. Probably the first one is for Steve. I was actually just looking at the lot on Google Maps, and you can see that the building, there's quite a few windows that face the lot. There's actually the picture that they show, the windows are open. And on several of the windows are open. What is the plan with the community to protect their apartments and the windows from having dust or vapors from passing in? That was my first question. My second question was, if there is elevated levels or an issue on the lot, it sounds like the engineers will be contacting OER. What is the plan with OER to communicate with community residents? And how will that be done and alerted in a timely manner for people near the lot and living on top of the lot?
I'll take the first part. So as we talked about before, to make sure we're on top of any dust or vapor concerns, we're going to have a person on site with those 2 monitors. They have a Netronic software, so it provides real-time data to their cell phone. So if they're working on the site and something is happening at the downwind, they're going to get beeps and alerts. We also check them during the day, but we want to monitor if something's rising, we want to be on top of it. The other thing that we do is we're going to be working closest to the work zone with handheld instrumentation, taking readings not near the site boundary, but closer to where the work is. So we should know if there's a vapor concern or an odor, we should notice it first in our work zone. At this site, you know, we would be taking preemptive or protective measures for dust. I would imagine most of the time you would see us with the hose by the site entrance, but there would be another hose where the person will be going around and spraying truck pathways and loading areas so we don't cause dust when we go around. If we have a reading, we alert OER and tell them what would, actually, excuse me, if we have a reading and a problem, the first thing we do is implement protective measures, which would be dust suppress, use an odor foam on the petroleum, and we are planning on having that on site readily available, so we're not going to have to go and find it. We would take the action first to eliminate the problem and stop the work. And then before we resume work, we would make sure that everything is good. Depending on the severity, we would definitely notify OER at the end of the day. But if it was a very odorous problem, I would imagine I might call OER and say that we're having some odors here. One thing that we haven't talked about, and it could be an odor that we smell here, and it's not petroleum or contamination, but we do expect to encounter some old timbers that are parts of old piers or bulkheads as we do excavate. And some of those timbers might have like waterproofing creosote on it. It's like a tar. And sometimes the tar smells. Well, it's not a contaminant, it's a nuisance odor. And we are sensitive to that too. We're gonna have a foam there that would be used for either the creosote or petroleum. I hope that answers your concerns.
Yeah, I would just, the only thing, I don't know where you live, but one of the things that happens on these locations down near the water is being downwind from the site isn't always feasible because the wind tends to move all over the place. So I don't know if you guys have plans with residents in that house, if they're gonna have to keep their windows shut throughout the length of the construction, but just to think about that the wind patterns aren't so straightforward. That dust could be moving all around, and it's sometimes hard to capture with only the 2 camp stations on site. So thank you.
Thank you. Tanya, are you back, or can you
speak? She's having difficulty unmuting, and I don't know how to fix that.
So I guess there's nothing we can do. So maybe we can lower their hands when Tanya later, when she can do it, then we let her.
Or Tanya can put her point in the chat and I'll read it for her.
Yeah.
Or maybe you can give a phone number, Jackie, that they can call in, like you, or you can DM her a phone number.
I think Linda's suggestion is pretty good. She can type in the chat, and then Linda can read that to the meeting. Okay, so Linda, can you lower their hands?
Sure.
Thank you.
Just a point that she's getting a message that says the host is not allowing participants to unmute themselves. I don't know if she's pressing the OK button.
Yeah, I don't have a way of.
Yeah, I can see from the screen.
Person.
Yeah, I can see from her screen. If you go to the bottom left and you try clicking that microphone, that might work. As opposed to clicking the OK button. But in any case, if she's able to figure it out, we'll go back. But
I'm
like
sorry.
she say, yep, no, that's okay. So we have to, committee members, we have to decide what we want to do with this wrestle. I just assume that we want to give comments, and I think a wrestle is needed. We need to provide some comments, and from the discussion we just had, I feel like there's some points we want to make, and anyone want to make the suggestions?
Sorry, Jackie, have you sent us a draft that you want us to work on, or do you want us to do from scratch something?
So I sent you a draft, but it was not really a draft because I just put the facts on. I had several whereas clauses regarding the facts of this project, but I don't have any like the resolve clauses, any discussion. I don't have that on the wrestle. So maybe Linda, can you pull up the rest?
Sure.
Thank you.
While we're pulling this up, just some things that I had to include just to speed this process up a bit is that number one, this is in an environmental justice area, and I think that's been forgotten And I don't know if AKRF or the Office of Remediation is really aware of how we treat places like this. It's critical that we don't do what the bare minimum says, that we go above and beyond for a lot of different reasons. But I know I see it here in the whereas, but I just think that that is important, and I think that both agencies need to understand that.
I wonder, because we need someone to type out the languages and the comments. I wonder if
I can do that, Jackie.
You want to do that? Okay.
I can do it right in front of your eyes.
Or you can send it to me and I'll do it in the minutes.
Well, since
I
we
just
have the
don't.
document in front of us, that's the easiest way.
Okay, but can you
I
send
will
it to
send
me
it
at
to
the
you,
end?
of course.
Yep. And just to make things easier, if anyone has comments you want to get into the reso, you can put that in the chat, and Linda, that would all goes to Linda, right? All the comments we put in would go to Linda, and then Linda just copy and paste to the document. That just make this easier for everyone.
I wish I had that skill. I'm gonna have to do a lot of dictating, Jackie.
Yeah. So where should we, like, I want to ask you guys, like, where do you think this reso should go? Like, what comments we want to be included?
Yeah, I have an idea. Let's do first the bullet point of the important issues that came up today. So I would say the first thing is what Trevor talked about, the restrictive declaration, that we want to make sure.
The task force, yes.
Yes, because
and the monitor, yeah.
That are required before anything should start.
Yeah,
yes.
I think these are very important.
Agree.
Give me your words.
Can you type that out?
I can talk it out.
You have to type it out. You can type out the.
I can type. You, Trevor, talked. I can type.
No, Olympia. I want you to type. Olympia.
If you talk it out, I can catch it. Just don't talk real fast.
The point is that a community construction task force has to be established as pursuant to the restrictive declarations. DCP, along with the community board, is supposed to form this task, and the task is supposed to be formed before construction starts. Most of our discussion of this type of discussion should actually be in a task force meeting, so we don't talk about a lot, because we could go on forever about construction, knowing now they're looking really to start in a few weeks, even though end of February, to me, that's a few weeks. There should also be, I wrote it down.
The independent monitor?
Yeah, I'm just looking for the correct words, but it's an independent monitor that's also appointed by DCP. Appointment and role of a monitor, an independent monitor by DCP. This is part of the restricted declaration.
Can you make that a complete sentence, please?
An independent monitor appointed by DCP should be appointed pursuant to the restrictive declarations. And that should also, the restrictive declaration language is also in the community construction task force.
Trevor.
Mm-hmm.
So the pursuant to the, I'm sorry, Linda. So I sent you a text in the chat. It should go after the first bullet. Starts pursuant to the restrictive declaration issued by DCP. And regarding the independent monitor, does DCP say so or not? I don't recall DCP require independent monitor.
It's in the restricted declaration, which I'm looking at right now.
All right. Okay.
These are left over from the large scale development area. Is that where these restrictive declarations come from?
Well, on approval of the EAS and the projects, there were several restrictive declarations. I'm only pointing out two. There are some others that do with parks and subway stations and changing the light by 0.1 millisecond to allow for 8,000 people to cross the street, but that's another story. But these are the two that are in that are really important for here, considering the timetable that they want to start with.
Sarah and Steve, I understand Sarah is not very familiar with the restrictive declaration. I'm just wondering, like, from your experience, or Steve maybe can address that, or you have to get back to us on this. Are there any other conditions surrounding these restrictive declaration? I don't want to put that on our reso, and then we find out that this project actually does not fall in meet that requirement. So I just want to be careful about that.
Jackie, may I just insert Tanya's comment now? Poor Tanya, who couldn't do it any other way.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
I have Tanya's comment.
Okay.
It says, my name is Tanya Castro Negron, and I am the co-chair of Lands End 2 RA Residents Association. I've been working closely and diligently. Wait a minute, look at the rest of it. Working on block 247 lot. Ooh, it's hard to read, I'm sorry. The way the chat has done this to me.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay, I've been working diligently on all block 247 lot 2 development proposals and projects. Much of the information shared today is alarming, minimizing the impact engagements of the residents directly impacted by these proposed developments. That just last week we're discussing paving up 100 of our windows prior to construction during COVID, a deadly virus, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know about that. I guess closing up all of their windows, is that a part of the plan? Do you know, Trevor?
Can you chat her back the phone number? I think it's easier if she speaks. I understand that you're reading her text, but sometimes it doesn't really come across. I don't know if she. Well,
I'm sorry. Is she referring to other windows or the Lands End windows?
Lands End windows, I believe.
Jackie, Tawana has her hand up. Maybe she can express what Tanya's trying to. She's the co-chair.
Yeah.
Sure.
Hi,
yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Yes. One of the concerns is the fact that we are told that 100 of our windows will be closed, paved, and we're concerned because of the ventilation. Those windows were placed there specifically for the ventilation to flow through our buildings. And so if they pave that up, not only are we losing the ventilation, but we're also losing the sunlight, because these are really large, massive buildings that are going to be right there on our buildings. So that's one of the concerns that we definitely have.
Thank you. Damaris, something you want to say?
I mean, no, that was it. I knew that's what they were referring to.
Yeah.
Those windows, because it's a room with 2 windows. So they're losing a window, and that's what they're referring to. They're losing one of those windows, which is directly facing the light, air, light, everything she said.
Well, yes, and we, our wrestle tonight is about the cleanup. It's just about the cleanup. It's not about the future development, but thank you for that comment. I think we are very aware of your concern. Can we continue?
I've popped in a couple comments from Dominic that he put in the chat.
Thank you, Dominic. I also want to add that because they said they would have daily report, I want to, I'm sorry?
I'm agreeing,
yeah, so I want those daily reports to be accessible to community stakeholders and community board.
Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Jackie?
Olympia, is that?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, just because I think we were interrupted because we were trying to get Tanya's comment. I wanted to make sure when you asked that question about whether the restrictive declaration qualifies this work or not, if it doesn't qualify, we should still ask it, you know what I mean? But let's get the answer first, because that was the interruption that occurred before.
Okay, okay. Well, it'll be better we have those like information correct. That's why I'm saying. Okay, any other comments from committee members?
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I already spoke. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I agree with a combination of both of those comments. I don't think that it should be up to them. I mean, I think we should know what we're asking for, but I also think we should ask them to ensure that they are interpreting that restrictive declaration properly. So
that they're in compliance.
Right, that they're in compliance to the extent that we can, look into it ourselves and provide the language that shows that. I don't think that the onus should strictly be on us. But I also think that if we're raising it, we should have something very specific to point to. So thank you for bringing that up, Trevor, by the way. And
Yeah,
thank you, Olivia, for
who won
raising
the
it.
football games this weekend? I didn't see any of them.
So basically, Jackie, what we could do is make a standalone point that says we want to make sure that OED make sure that all the work is in compliance with all restrictive declarations. And then we can say in particular, we want, and then we can go on the task force and on the monitor.
I cannot see that. Let me see. Maybe Linda, you have to scroll up the document. Can you guys see it? Thank you.
Yeah, and can you let Tawana speak again? She's got her hand up.
Yeah, Tawana, you have to be quick because we have to finish this.
Yes, no, actually, it's for Tanya. I have her on the phone. I think you all can hear her.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so OER's responsibility is to environmental protection and public health. The residents of Lands End 2 are clearly stating that we have a lot of concerns regarding our health, right? And yes, just last week, the owners, the developers came to the building to sit down related to discuss next steps of paving up all the windows on the B and C line. Also to reconstruct the exit door of the South Street exit and the management office. None of these things have been discussed with the resident association. I just want to share that back in November 17th, 2009, Ricky Leung came to CB3 and shared our concerns regarding our air quality and the structural stability of our buildings. Today, I'm doing the same. So our concerns are really clear. Our buildings shake, our buildings vibrate. We have cracks in our walls. I've said this repeatedly, and I'm asking you all to support us in what we're saying. We're asking OER to come to Lands End 2 and make sure we're okay before anything is approved moving forward. Our environmental and our health is really important. We have predominantly senior citizens living in our buildings that we lost. I'm emotional because they're my residents, they're my seniors, and they're my neighbors. We've lost too much. We can't lose anymore. Help us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Jackie, to her point, I had in my notes a technical question because they repeat it again and again, and maybe Stephen knows the answer, that they would only build the 3.5 feet or something second wall toward basically into the water table. And it felt like it was more like retention toward the East River. But to the resident leader that was just talking, in terms of the impact that the digging and the structure is going to have on the adjacent building, what specifically are they doing from the structural engineering point of view to make sure that they stabilize that?
I'm an environmental consultant. I'm not a structural engineer, but I know that there is a structural engineer working with the construction team, and I believe there is a vibration monitoring requirement for the MTA as well as adjacent buildings. But it's not under my in my wheelhouse, so I don't have the proper way to answer that for you at this time.
Fundamentally, the important thing is because OER work maybe historically doesn't have this structural component, but in this case, because of the adjacency, it's very important that this is, this is addressed, I think.
I believe it's governed by the Department of Building Department regulations.
Yeah. So how about this? Let's finish certain points first, and then we go back to whatever point is missing so that we can keep moving. Linda, can you move the last point as the first, to the first, and then assume that the work is in compliance with all the restrictive declarations, such as community construction task force to be established, and it just flow better that way.
You want these to be sub-bullets?
Yeah, sub-bullets. That would be,
That's fine, it's in there.
I'm sure.
Yep.
I'm sure.
I couldn't get into that.
Can you, Tanya, can you turn that off? Thank you.
Hey, Jackie.
Yes.
I'm wondering if we can reference the actual restrictive declaration. It's the one from the LSRD from 1972, right? Just because it's without mentioning the exact one, it's a little bit unclear, I think.
Do you have that information?
Yeah, I don't know how to reference it. It's not from 1972. These were new restricted declarations that were put in place for the approval of these buildings. So
for
several.
See?
Yeah, right. These are new.
The zoning change, right?
Okay.
Zoning change. So there are others, including Lisa's catch on the archaeological possibilities that are in there, but for this particular topic, those two are important. And a lot of things that Tanya has mentioned, including the boarding up of her windows or plastering the windows, could have been discussed and talked about if we had the independent monitor and the community construction task force team, which we do not have. But those I can reference it later. I can send it to, but I did send it to the community board because we've had them for a while, the restricted decks.
Yeah. Okay, great. And then the other thing I was going to mention is that I don't know if people think it's appropriate, but I was pretty, I don't know, disturbed by the comment on rushing to get the 421A tax break. So I'm wondering if other people think it's, I mean, I know they responded to it, and I'm not sure if the people receiving this letter will be able to affect this, but it may be helpful to say that we shouldn't rush, and I'm happy to include language that we shouldn't rush construction or remediation in order for the developer to receive their tax break, tax exemption.
Well, one of the things I had mentioned, and I know they said they would extend to February 9th, which is nice, but it doesn't give us enough time, is that they extend it until after our next land use meeting, because we will know by then whether there's a task force and whether the independent monitor or whether we started the process. So I think we should ask for more time. I know they're going to push back and they ignore it, but I think as a community board, we need to ask for it.
Okay.
I am fine with Trevor's comment, but I don't want to specifically saying that we don't want them to get 421A tax break. I think you'd be fine to say we want to have more time for the community to get to know this project.
Well, that's a little different. That's a different point from what Michael was saying. You know, we're just saying that the developers want to rush the construction, at least put in a foundation or something so they can get their task break. This is not unusual, unfortunately.
I mean,
tax break, Linda.
Yeah, we need to clarify if there is an agency that is reviewing what we're writing and they don't understand why they're rushing this. We need to spell this out. We're not saying that we don't want them to get it, but that's not a priority.
But not at our expense.
Well, I mean, can I just chime in here? I mean, I think that we should probably ask, I don't even know if it's possible to push the deadline back for the 421A, because it would be, you know, there's been a lot of community opposition to this project and lawsuits, all kinds of stuff. And, you know, those haven't necessarily been successful. It doesn't mean that we won't ultimately be successful, but it would be such a shame at the end of all of this if, you know, this project still goes up and there's no component of, you know, other housing here. So I'm not saying that one should trump the other, but I am saying that we should ask and explore whether that tax credit program's deadline can be pushed back some to give the amount of time that is necessary.
Yeah, I don't know if that's
Mayor,
part
just for notation, there's a restrictive declaration on the affordable component too.
Which says what exactly? That this
That
deadline
they,
must
I don't know the exact language, but they must build 25% or whatever it is. But that's another restrictive deck.
So that would come regardless of whether they're able to access 421A.
Correct. There's another part of that, but
So Trevor, can you tell us who is supposed to be enforcing the restrictive declarations? Only DCP?
DC, from what I know, DCP, which apparently has Mr. Ball here a little bit, but I don't know the status of the permits because it doesn't appear that there's any zoning permits that have been approved or construction permits, unless Stephen wants to correct me, because I don't see any. But we should find that out, and that's why I think we should ask for more time.
Yeah.
I also want to, well, it gets into maybe too detail. Steve just mentioned that there's going to be 21 trucks every day. Is that right? 21.
except when they're 60.
I can't hear. I'm sorry.
They said that, you know, they're not going to truck every day, but when they do truck, they figured many days there would be 20 and there would be a peak time of 60 for about 4 weeks.
So do you guys want to put that down as a comment? We want them to, I don't see those information in the package. That's why we want to put that down as a comment in the result.
Can I ask a question? Because I don't know how to put this hand down that I have raised. That
yes,
I don't know if I'm on the stack or not. You know, like I don't know. Before I gave you guys the thumbs up, and I you know, but maybe Trevor, you might know the answer to this. So I think when I think about the level of trucks coming into the neighborhood, you know, what comes to mind is that on top of what might be happening possibly at LMCR. Now, I haven't followed LMCR, or which is now not called that anymore. What is it? The
BMCR.
Two Bridges Coastal, huh?
BMCR.
BMCR, okay. And so I don't know the exact timeline and if there's overlap, but I would assume that there's going to be some level of, you know, traffic and bringing in, you know, equipment and other, you know, materials. And if there's an overlap, we're not just looking at 21 trucks a day, we're looking at far more than that. So yes, I would say we should put some language in here about minimizing, you know, these truck routes or figuring out other ways to mitigate them, because if there is overlap among the two projects, you know, I think we're going to have a serious problem on our hands.
Damaris, just to add to that point, the neighbors at Linden 1 also have a proposed 70-story tower, and across the street there's a proposed 100-story tower, which will have a detrimental effect, which I think, and this is why I keep emphasizing it, that we need to get a community construction task force in place before anything is done. No podcasts, nothing, because this, honestly, learning about this tonight is pretty insane. And there's a lot of things not in place, and it's not OER or AKRF. This is really, or maybe, but this is really what the city has promised us in restrictive declarations that we really need to follow up on. Because it's not just BMCR, there are other projects, and there's another one, but that's a whole other story.
Not to mention Pier 42.
Right, not to mention Pier 42. Oh my gosh.
As I remember that we actually drafted language around this issue. Maybe it was during the Euler Pro ESCR, EIS, because fundamentally what we had asked was for coordination. When there is such a density of different projects happening adjacent, that they needed to coordinate the various projects. So, I mean, we could look up at that language from the past and copy and present it at the full board meeting. Basically, we can add it and then just, because it's very important.
Damaris, can you just, would you be able to create certain like language for this bullet and then we can move on?
I think what Olympia just said is actually the right way, is like coordinating the incoming and outgoing traffic that is being caused by the construction. And we named those projects, but we didn't even touch on the fact that ESCR is also going to have trucks coming down Montgomery Street. So that's the entire neighborhood, like that whole community is about to be completely covered in trucks. So maybe some of the language, I like the language that you sort of used, Olympia, maybe we can fine tune that.
Yeah, so what is missing from what you're writing now is basically that these are different projects. So coordinate the incoming and outgoing truck traffic with other construction projects in the area. Yes, that sounds good. With
that okay? We could hone that language. I just wanted to capture
with
the
multiple adjacent, maybe.
Should we name the projects, Jackie? Should we name them?
Name
a few, say something
yeah,
like
we can
that.
name a few and yeah.
It doesn't have to be exhaustive, but we should give some example of what we're talking about.
Such as in the area, such as.
I got ESCR. What else?
BMCR.
BMCR.
We can define it later if we need.
Yeah, I think we have language from the past, guys.
Put it there first. BMCR.
BMCR. That's the main project that's going on right across the street.
BMCR.
B as in boy.
Oh, V.
Brooklyn, Montgomery, Coastal Resiliency.
Yeah. Maybe we should spell these out, huh?
And etc. Okay, I think we are good. Any other points you want to?
Well, the extension of time.
Okay. Can you say it out?
Drawing a blank. Someone help me. It's very simple. We need more time, but extend the deadline.
Well, can I wrote something like this in my notes. Sufficient time must be taken to fully evaluate this remediation plan and to gain community feedback. And the construction and mediation cannot be rushed in order to meet any tax incentive or other funding deadlines.
Perfect.
Can I just ask a question? Do we think that that's direct enough in saying now give us time?
We're not rushing to the 421A. It's just something that we're trying to achieve. It's not until June and we're only in January, so it's not really a rush for us. It's just a goal.
I understand, but you raised this, so we want to address it.
Yep, everyone seems to be thinking that we're really rushing on it and we're not. It's just a critical deadline.
Steve, I think what the issue was is when we were asked for more time and we only got through February 9th, and we're trying to get this so we didn't have to spend these hours at this meeting so we could discuss it at next meeting. And we're forced to do this tonight. That's why I was trying to
finish this wrestle. Try to finish this wrestle because we have another item on the agenda, so we have to finish this. Lisa, you were saying sufficient time.
Sufficient time must be taken to fully evaluate this remediation plan and to gain community feedback. And the construction and remediation cannot be rushed in order to meet any tax incentive or other funding deadlines. So it's sort of incorporates a bullet above.
Yeah.
You want to say that again a little more slowly? I got the first part.
Do you want to paste it in the chat?
Yeah, I was going to say.
Well, I'd have to type it again because have my computer open and I'm going to send you an email with it.
That'll do.
Jackie, you want to ask Stephen a question on this so we can
Sure,
sort of push this
sure.
and get it done? And this is for, because this is an AKRF on page 26328. It says that this site does not lie in a federal emergency management agency designated floodplain. Is that accurate? Or am I misinterpreting the FEMA designated floodplain? I don't know if Stephen left or.
Sorry about that. I have to check the map and confirm. Obviously, it didn't appear in the floodplain when we checked. I have to see the topographic map to make sure and confirm.
I'm just going to say, I'm pretty sure we are.
Okay. So Linda, now Lisa has given you that language. I think we can go back to the third bullet.
So,
no, that's not. We have to remove that one because that is a duplicate. The construction and remediation should not be rushed in order to get the 421A task credit. Then we can remove that one.
You want to just remove that?
Yeah, just remove this one.
but the one
that's a different point.
It is?
Michael, you have to explain this.
No, it's the same point because the 421A tax exemption is.
Yeah.
Right.
I wanted to incorporate what Damari said in what Lisa just provided by making it more specific and basically asking them to go beyond February 9th. So where we say the current deadline of February 9th doesn't allow for sufficient time. You know what I mean? Because we are going to need more time in order to convene the task force, etc. So just not make it generic, sufficient time must be allowed, but basically we want to go beyond February 9.
Where shall I put that?
Sufficient time must be taken to fully evaluate this remediation plan beyond the current deadline of February 9th.
Perfect. Does this address your needs, Damaris and Trevor?
Okay, we have to.
It's so small.
It is so small.
I know that's a.
Jackie, I would say it addresses. I'm just trying to look. I know you want to wrap it up. I'm just trying to look through my notes to see if there's anything else. And, and I hate to provide bullet points after the meeting, so I'm just trying to make sure I get as much. I have a lot more, but just want to make sure we get everything.
Thank you. And second, while you are doing that, I want to add a little bit thing. Second to the last bullet, coordinate the incoming and outgoing truck traffic with other construction project in the area. I wanted to add something like to minimize the traffic stress to the community, something like that. I feel like you need to say it out.
So Jackie, you're referring to the 21 rides that you were talking about earlier?
The 21. Yeah.
So I had a question about that because one thing that I noticed is actually timetable is very important because there are specific hours of the days when the schools go in and go out. We need to make sure those 21 trucks are not around during school, you know, in the morning. Basically, it should be after 9:30 a.m. and before 2, basically. And then maybe after 3:30 and before 6, whatever. But it should definitely not be going in and out where all those kiddos are out there.
I feel like the number of trucks in the area and also the time they can come in and go out, like we have to memorize those information. I just don't have the language. Anyone can create the language for that.
Well, maybe we can add it to this bullet here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe not. Say your point again, Olympia.
So, I mean, I don't even know if Stephen has officially announced the 21 tracks. Is there somewhere we can reference these 21 tracks, Stephen?
It's just a guesstimate.
So basically, should we say, given that the OED consultant, OAKRF, if we can refer to them specifically, I don't know, estimates that in the days that remediation will take place, approximately 21 track trips may take place in the area.
Sounds like a whereas.
Yeah.
Right.
That's fine to reference as far as I'm concerned. Yes.
Jackie, I wanted to add one more bullet point.
Let Linda finish this one first.
Well, I'm trying to see if people agree with me that Olympia is saying it's a whereas. And we'll put the facts of the number of trucks per day in the whereas, right?
There were two numbers, a minimum number and a maximum estimate number.
It is estimated.
I would say up to, I think Stephen mentioned more than 21. I think he said how many?
60 at maximum.
They said 60 for a 4-week period during the peak part of the foundation.
There will be 21 truck trips per day, right?
Yes.
With the exception of, and what do you call that period?
I don't know, is it school drop-off and pickup? Or
Stephen, what do you call the period where there's going to be 60 trucks?
Oh,
peak excavation period.
Say it again, sorry.
Peak excavation period.
Except of the peak destination period.
Excavation.
Excavation. Okay, good. So much fun listening to things on Zoom when there may be 64 trucks per day. Okay.
Okay, thank you. For any other points you want to add, we need to wrap this up. It's now
Yeah, just the point of there's a sidewalk issue in front of the site. The sidewalk across the street is a bike lane and the other sidewalk is blocked by city or agency trucks. So there's nowhere to walk for this site at all.
Jackie, before we do a new therefore, we haven't finished writing the therefore about the 61 tracks. What we're asking, one is to coordinate the various sites, and the second thing is to make sure that no trips take place in the moments of school drop-off and pickup, right? And I don't know if there are other important times in that area in terms of senior services. If there are specific areas that, because I know there is concentration of senior citizens, I don't know if there is a specific time of the day that maybe there is meals delivery or something like that.
I haven't seen that kind of restriction. Usually school hours, they tend to pay more attention. Okay.
I can get information on those school times. That the other issue I wanted to raise is the sidewalk issue, because it's going to be big, especially with the traffic that goes to Basketball City and Pier 42.
Is that another whereas, I think?
Yeah. And I don't know, whereas there's a lot of pedestrian traffic that comes down Rutgers Slip and uses South Street. Well, it's a sidewalk, and there's a school that at the end of South Street on Montgomery, I think, that also has a lot of pedestrian traffic. That if this sidewalk is closed, people will be forced to cross the street, and the sidewalk is blocked on the side and has been historically blocked for some time. So some coordination needs to be made so that there's some place to walk. Because right, if they close that sidewalk, there's absolutely no place to walk on the other side for a very long stretch, for the stretch of the construction site.
And that's because of a bike lane?
Well, there's a bike lane, but there is a sidewalk, but it's been blocked by, I think they're city vehicles. Across the street is sanitation and the fire department. Yeah. Good luck getting them off the sidewalk.
Yep, I've had that problem.
So it's especially for kids going to school, that trying to walk in a bike lane for 3 or 4 blocks is not acceptable.
I'm scared of those bike lanes. Okay, so now what do we want to do about that?
I mean, do you have a lane of traffic you can close? And do you want that?
No, it's just that they need to remove those cars from the sidewalk. That would be the simple solution.
And they have to clear the sidewalk across the street.
Right.
Okay. DOT.
Yeah, DOT is going to enforce the sanitation men who park their private cars there.
I just think we need to be very careful because there's a school there and there's no crossing guards at that intersection, which you may want to ask for later on, but we need to be very, very careful. And Stephen, one last question before we wrap this up. There's a playground, there are two playgrounds. There's a playground on the site that's on the easement subway. Is that playground going to be closed?
I have no knowledge of that, I'm sorry.
Where's the playground, Trevor?
It's directly next to the, in fact, some of it will, I don't know if it approaches on the site, but it's directly next to the excavation site. It's on the corner of Rutgers and South Street.
Just to the west.
I haven't heard any
I know
discussion.
that playground. Directly to the west. Ah.
Stephen, why not ask us, have permits been approved for any of this yet?
I'm not sure. I believe they got a building permit, but I'm not involved with the permit process, just my OER approval.
Understood.
So I mean, I think that therefore we should also say that currently
I'm sorry. Part of OER's approval allows them to get certain permits. So some permits might not be gotten yet, but I don't know the status of each one.
Understood.
Okay, Trevor, I'm sorry, Olympia, I want to let Trevor finish that point first.
Yeah, it's on this point. What I wanted to tell him is about the playground. You should also mention the fact that they closed. There is a scarcity right now because they closed the river, right? So if you also close the few playgrounds that are there I mean, maybe the city needs to delay this work because until they have enough outdoor space for kids to use.
Yeah, I just think I don't want to get too deep in the woods for this
Yeah.
OER thing, and I definitely agree with you. I mean, that's why I have a whole bunch of notes I could add. I'm just really trying to clean this up for OER and get us some more time so we can get that task force established.
Thank you, Trevor. Any other comments? We have to move.
What about the issue of the structural engineer that Stephen said works separately? Is this something that we need to bring on this resolution, Stephen, or it is happening anyway?
Oh, this is a cleanup comment. This is a wrestle for the cleanup.
But in order to do the cleanup, you may still have structural impact, right? You can't do cleanup without digging. So what I'm asking is, in this process that we know there is a little bit of lack of coordination, should we be highlighting that we want to have this kind of reassurances?
Stephen, I think Olympia is asking for your input on that regarding the, because I mean, I don't see, I mean, other committee members, do you have any thoughts on that?
We have to follow the building department code, and the project will.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't understand what you just said, Stephen.
He said he follow code.
The building department has requirements for when you construct a building next to another building, and the team has to follow those requirements.
So the team that will be performing the OED work.
Oh yeah, you mean? I don't want to include that point in the result. Other committee members, do you guys want to include it or not?
Did you understand?
I didn't understand it.
Yeah, Jackie, sorry, because I didn't even understand what was the answer of Stephen. Basically, what we're just asking is that whatever is the building code for pure construction, it's already enacted during the work that they're doing, during the period that they're doing this work of remediation.
Yes.
That's correct, right? Perfect. So we don't need to ask for it because it's already the law, right, Steve?
Yeah.
Perfect.
That's my understanding as well. Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments regarding the cleanup? Okay, looks like no. So we have to. I'm sorry, Tawana. This is the committee member session, so the public member session already closed. So we are not taking comments or questions anymore from the public. So committee members, do we want to read everything over again, or you guys are comfortable with what we already have? Let me clean up a little bit after.
Yeah.
That really needs cleanup for sure.
Yes, we need to.
I can help with that.
Thank you, Lisa. That's so good to hear. So we can save time, and we always trust Lisa can clean up the wrestle really well. So I'm not going to read that again, just for the time consideration. And Linda is going to send this wrestle to this draft to Lisa, and
Absolutely.
Yep, and we have
Should
to
we vote on it, or what are we saying?
Yeah,
Are we
we
only
have
commenting?
to. I'm sorry.
What are we doing here? Are we commenting or actually passing a resolution?
We are passing a resolution, and the resolution is about comments.
But it's not going to say we support or don't support. It's just
No.
the comment.
That's correct. Yep.
But I think we should ask clearly what Trevor suggested, that is, we need more time. So this
It's
is
already in the language.
It's in there. It's in there.
Yeah, it's in there. All right. Someone motion to approve the wrestle.
So
Motion
moved.
to approve.
Second. Anyone say?
Second.
Do we have to take roll calling to do roll
Yes.
calling?
We do? Oh, can we do it all at once at the end? Or you want to do it now?
I don't mind to do it in the end, just if any other committee members have problem with that. If not, then we can do it at the end.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So this item is closed. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Sarah, Adisha, and Michelle for joining us tonight. I think we're going to have a lot of conversation with your firm and your agency soon. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, Sarah.
Have a good night.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Oh, let me send a text message to Maya. So the next item is the resilience questionnaire. Dominic has been working with Maya on this project. And I don't want to spend too much time on introduction again because we are running out of time. So Dominic, is Maya on yet? Let me see. Just give me 1 second.
I do not see Maya.
Just getting on right now. So Dominic is the point person for this project right now. He's coordinating our comments and our input with Maya. And Dominic, do you think we should share the what you sent me earlier today now, or Maya is gonna presenter later.
I
Her
think
do that.
Maya's going to present it, so I think it's fine if you want to share it. I think just maybe before Maya gets on, I'll just share that I had relayed the comments from the last meeting, as well as comments that I got via email about really the need to focus it a little bit more. Also to balance it with the other interests and concerns that we have historically, especially on the board, and balancing that with any additional sustainability questions. We, is Maya on? I don't want to.
Yeah, she's waiting.
Thunder. Hey,
She's
Maya.
waiting to. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, I'm here.
Hey there. So one key thing is that we found on the CB3 site that there are a couple of sort of questionnaires that are given to housing developers, and that questionnaire already incorporates some of the key things that we're very much concerned about. And so what Maya has done is figure out a way to try to really condense what you all saw last time into something that's more manageable, that would then be put into and can then be integrated with that questionnaire. And whatever level the committee thinks is important to to keep things balanced. So
perfect.
Yeah. All right. So Maya.
Great. I just need to share my screen, please. And Jackie, were you able to distribute this before the meeting?
No.
Okay.
It's only 3 pages and it's not very lengthy. So I figured that you can
totally fine.
Yeah.
It's very short.
And those questions are not really technical, so I figured that you probably can just present it to the committee yourself.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
So I'm sorry, is someone able to give me the sharing?
Oh, okay. Sure.
Sorry.
Didn't quite catch that. I made Dominic possible, so I didn't do you. Where did you go? Ah, down here. Maya. I know, do it this way. Okay, you should be good.
All right, thank you. All right, so I'm going to share the document. All right, everyone can see this, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this is the second update for the Green Development and Sustainability Questionnaire. First, we have the Green Building Certification. So we decided, like Dominic kind of said before, that we wanted to make it more simple and short and a little less technical than I had last month. So we decided on this table where we'll be asking what types of certification or certifications these developers are participating in and their score if applicable. Because some of them have scores and some of them don't. They're either participating in it or they're not. And then in this last column, we have CB3's threshold, what that means, and I put a little note here that it might be based off of development type. What we were thinking is that there'd be a threshold for the ones that have scores. So LEED, for example, you can be certified and then it goes up from like bronze, silver, gold, or platinum. So for example, a luxury development, we might have it at a higher threshold than an affordable unit or development that might be at a lower threshold. That being said, that I want to leave that definitely up to feedback. I think that's up to the committee to base it off of development type. It doesn't need to be that way. I think there can just be like one universal one. Because if we do base it off of development type, this part would probably have to be filled out before it's given to any developer. So it would have to change. So I'm definitely looking for feedback on that. And then after that, we have just notes for any additional green features that might not be included in these certifications, but that the developer might want to highlight. And then the
I just want to pipe in really fast. So
Yeah.
one thing I think you all saw last time, right? There was like many pages of questions that looked very technical, and what I came to understand is something like the enterprise green communities, that there's an online like Excel tool that asks all these questions, it asks a lot of the questions that, I mean, Maya had done a really good job of trying to filter out, some of the important ones, but we saw how lengthy it was. And what it seemed like was, if the committee had an understanding of like what certain scores mean, or what, kind of major categories are for some of these certifications, and, maybe we like a couple of the certifications and we want to strike the rest of them, or something like that, and really better understand what those certifications are and what those scores mean. Then you can deep dive into each of those certification areas and not have it be a part of this.
Right. Thank you.
So, yeah.
And then just moving right along to the second part. So at the last meeting, equity was brought up. So we wanted to incorporate that, and we're calling this section the Good Green Neighbors. And so there's only 8 questions. Most of the questions I did get from this footnote. You can click the link here, and I will be sending a PDF of this in the chat when I'm done. Most of them came from this EPA report, but some of them were Dominic's idea or ideas. And like I said, it's not very lengthy. It's not technical. I think they'll be easy to incorporate into the housing application, and I think they'll fit actually quite well. But that being said, I think that I do want it to be specific for CB3. So again, like feedback, like if there are any common questions in terms of equity that you're always asking developers, I think this is the perfect place to insert them. Or if some of these questions maybe everyone thinks are like not relevant, we can of course take them out. Like, I just want to stress that this is definitely a first draft. So I think we both see this like evolving over the next few months as I'm working on it. So the next 2 steps for me, after getting some feedback or questions, will be to 1, incorporate it into the housing questionnaire, and then 2 would be to create a separate doc or workbook that would further explain these certifications. So when this table is to be filled out, we would know exactly what the score means, or what the participation means for the development. And that's about it.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Questions from the committee?
Well, my first reaction, if I can just speak, is that that's way closer to what we need. Yes, I'm very
Okay,
pleased with the work you've done. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to look at it in more detail. You're not asking us to take any action tonight, but I think we're getting much closer. This is not directly relevant to you, but I think the fact that what you're saying is that we want to integrate this, as I do too, with a more general questionnaire. I, for one, I think I'm relatively connected to this committee. I did not remember. I am not familiar with that questionnaire. I don't know if we really have used it regularly. I think we ought to also take a look at it and make sure that it really does reflect our values too. Because, yeah, I'd be curious if other people even knew we had it, because I didn't. So
Lisa,
as part of this, I think we have to just take a comprehensive look. Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. I am going to send this document to all of you after the meeting. And you have any feedback, comments, you can contact Dominic directly. I see all your comments also copy me, so I know where your concerns are. So I thank you for that. I appreciate that. And regarding the housing questionnaire, it's so funny because I always thought that there was a questionnaire. I have seen that before, but then I was not, in the last meeting, I was not able to find it from the new website. So I also lost confidence in my own memory whether there was a, so I just don't recall.
I'm sure there was.
Because I have seen application with that questionnaires before. I agree with you. It's about time that we revise the questionnaire. Maybe we can add more priorities. We definitely can do that after this green project. I'm going to, I don't know, Olympia first and then Damaris.
Thank you. So, I mean, I think there is something like a checklist. That's what you're referring to as a housing questionnaire. There was a checklist at a certain point that the office was giving to developers. But anyway, it will be great if you can circulate that along with this.
Sure.
So, I mean, Maya, thank you so much. This is helpful. One way that, like, it's tough, but so having been through very long meetings of reviewing these various kind of evaluation, certification systems, fundamentally, a lot of them are a branding exercise, right? They're not really, so you know what I'm talking about. So I think it would be a lot of work for you, but it could make sense to spell out specific green features, because let's be honest, like energy efficiency, sustainability are very important right now, right? So I think, what does that look like in our district? Are we talking about green roofs? Are we talking about stormwater management, about the way they treat the soil? Or are we talking about alternative energy, stuff like that? It would, and I don't know if I'm asking you to do a huge work, but if there was a series of specific things, independent of what branding they want to give it, I don't care, that we evaluate locally and say thumbs up, that's what we need because we are a heat area or because of this or that. That would be very helpful, but I may be asking you a lot. And then for our committee, I would like to understand at a certain point, if somebody meets that threshold, what are we giving them? Just to be sure, but that's for a later time.
Dominic, you want to address first, or what is your hand?
Yeah, so I did. So Olympia, that's exactly the feedback that Maya was looking for, because like with the enterprise green communities, you can get like subcategories, and that's what I was saying to Maya, is I think that we need feedback from the committee about like what those most important areas are. Like, is it around building materials? Is it around the the heat related questions that are already in there? So I think that so like that one could be broken down so that it's actually, we get scores for the subcategories that are most important to our committee. LEED, I think that there's like a certain types of certifications, right? Like, so we would want to know, are you getting a certain type of LEED certification? So I think that's, yes. So I think Maya and I already talked about that. So I think that's good that you brought that up, and that probably what I would suggest maybe then is, if you all agree, unless you think there's another place to look, is just using the district needs statement, to help kind of guide where those priorities are for CB3.
Damaris.
To Damaris, when you speak, maybe there is also beyond the district needs, Dominic, the LES ready work or someone else like that,
So,
that. Go ahead.
Well, you might as well finish your statement, Olympia.
No, that was it basically, because that's what I had in my mind when I said, what do we need locally? Like what is more urgently needed?
Right. I mean, I was going to say two things. One is, I think we can look at the district needs statement and see what are some of the recommendations that we've made. But I also think that we should ask for them to be more specific, because, there's different things that may qualify you to get LEED certification, but they may not be the things that we deem as the most important. And so I would ask for that. And then the second thing I was going to speak on was, I didn't see the whole document, and I don't know if it was shared somewhere previously. And I don't know if it was presented to this committee. And because maybe I'm just operating, with a lack of information due to my own issues right now, because I wasn't at a meeting. Is your project, Maya, and, just gonna cover sort of greening and development, or is it also possible to extend it to other resiliency style measures? Like, for example, when they're building, are we looking at, is there flood protection being put in place? What about cogen or other things like that that can help those buildings be more resilient in this neighborhood? So this may not cover that, but I just wanted to ask if it does or it doesn't.
Aya, do you want to respond to that before we
Yes.
go to Michael?
Yes. As far as I know Dominic wrote the proposal for this project, but I am open. I hope I've been stressing this along the way, but I want to stress it again. I definitely want the document to be as useful to you guys and the board as it possibly can be. So if that means extending it beyond the strict definition of sustainability, like going beyond that to equity or resiliency, I'm more than happy to cover that. I actually have a fair amount of time designated to work on this project. So I don't think it's asking too much. And I think that resiliency is just as important as these other things. So I think that I will definitely consider incorporating that. That being said, I think some of those things like double dip, like this enterprise green communities thing that we've been talking about, it really is so comprehensive, and it does an amazing job of breaking it down into these categories. And when you abide by those categories, you, in a way, in some ways, not always, make yourself inherently more resilient. That's not always the case, but I think it's a good starting point. And I think having that in the back of my mind that you want to be a more resilient community is definitely something I can do.
Thank you. I mean, if I could just say one last thing. I mean, I think it's just important, hindsight is 2020. We want to make sure that as we're giving guidance or predicating our support on, the sustainability tactics that we're thinking about it, in a very holistic way, and not after the fact. It's like, oh, those buildings should have been built with no ground floors, for example. Well, there goes that chance, So thank you. Thank you for doing this work.
Thanks.
Thank you, Damaris. Michael.
Oh yeah, I'll be quick just because I know we hit the 3-hour mark.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say for the CB3 threshold, I think there could be maybe different thresholds for different development types if we're talking about size or something, but I definitely don't think that we should hold like type of building, at least like not affordable versus market rate or luxury, to different standards, just because I think that like poses a lot of major issues. So maybe if we do have a threshold, it would be for like buildings with, I don't know, 10 or fewer units, or buildings like in a floodplain or something, but not for affordable versus luxury, or for like commercial versus residential. Well, maybe that makes sense, but specifically just with like affordable housing, I don't think that we should hold it to a different standard. But yeah, again,
I agree with you. Yep.
Yeah. So and then with the score, I think it could be helpful. I know that like with LEED and probably with all of these certifications, there's like millions of points, but maybe we could come up with the like we kind of were mentioning earlier, what we find most important, and then when they fill out this questionnaire, they would just like check or say yes to whether or not they have those different like assets, or their project encompasses that. Just because, like we've been saying, a score of 80 may pass our threshold, but if it doesn't have like the three main like properties that we in CB3 find important, yeah, the score may not be as helpful. But thanks again, Maya and Dominic, for the work on this. I think it's going to be really helpful.
Dominic, you want to respond to that, right?
Yeah. So both to Damaris and Michael. So Damaris, definitely on the resiliency, there was actually, if Maya scrolled down, there is some stuff that gets to that already, but I think we can certainly pull that up more, in which feeds into what Michael was saying. First of all, thanks for the feedback on the thresholds. But like, I think what we'll do is look at the Olympia mentioned another document that we could look at, and go into these certifications and maybe propose what the categories are for the certifications that we think is important. Otherwise, like, I would love for you all to go in and look and send us feedback on that. If you can do that, that's awesome. But I just know, from having it's like you're going down a rabbit hole in a lot of these certifications. So it's hard to kind of pull it all together. So I think the strategy was to kind of put stuff out there for y'all to react to. But like in the next go around, if you're like, I'm still not seeing it, it's like really close. I may need some people to like really dig into a couple of the certifications and pull out exactly what they're thinking.
Thanks, Dominic. I agree with you. I'd rather have something to respond to.
Cool.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Thank you all. Do we have any more comments regarding this questionnaire? What I'm going to do is that I'll send you this document later tonight, and also the existing questionnaire, housing questionnaire, and the BSA applications we have for you guys. And if you have any more comments, you can just email to Dominic and I directly. Okay.
Good job, Maya.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you so much. And sorry for keeping you waiting.
Oh, it's all good.
Okay, so do we just need to wrap this up. Motion to adjourn.
No, we're gonna have the vote too, right?
Yeah.
I thought you said we have the motion to adjourn. Oh, so we don't have to vote to adjourn. We just
por derecho.
I'm sorry?
We have an exclusion to pass.
Right, we have to vote on the 265 South Street. Lisa.
Okay, Jackie.
Yes.
Linda.
Yes. Okay.
Michael.
Yes, thank you.
Jonathan.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Trevor.
Yes.
Lisa, yes. Olympia.
Yes.
Damaris.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
And Dominic.
Yes.
All right, and that counts as our final present vote. And
I think we don't have to do that. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think I went to other committee meetings and then they said we don't have to do the
yeah,
adjourn
no, I'm
vote.
saying that's it. That's
okay.
That's it. I agree.
Oh.
We don't have to do it again because I know
Okay.
who is here. If they
Okay.
voted yes.
Okay, thank you. All right.
So
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Nobody opposed, all agree, all in favor. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, guys. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Jackie.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.